as it is 6:08 or 6:09. So we'll wait one more minute. Welcome back, everybody. I'm recognizing that we are just over an hour behind schedule, so I am trying to condense things a little bit so that we are able to complete our night at a reasonable hour. Again, I am Ron Loffer, the Chief Electoral Officer for the National Chief Elections. For registered chiefs and proxies, I hope you've had a chance to cast a ballot. I know a few of you have made comments that you have not received your emails, and we're happy to work with you over the coming hours. There have been a good number of votes already, I should say, so a good number of you have voted. If you haven't yet tried to cast a test vote, please do check your email and cast your test vote over the coming hour or so. Perhaps better to do that while listening to me rather than the time when you should be focusing on the candidates. Anyway, I want to acknowledge that this virtual event is being hosted in Toronto, Ontario, territory of 6 nations of Grand River and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Toronto Purchase Treaty number 13. And I'm currently speaking to you from unceded Algonquin territory. Before we begin the All Candidates Forum, I have a few housekeeping items to review. As you know, voting for National Chief begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are a registered chief or proxy for the AGA and haven't yet received any email from Simply Voting, again, please do call our help desk tonight to ensure your registration is in order. If you registered in the last hour or so, you might not have received an email from Simply Voting as yet. The help desk number, just as a refresher, is 1-833-236-8324. Voting will close tomorrow for that first round of voting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and results will be announced at approximately 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If another round of balloting is needed, they will begin at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We will not conduct more than 2 rounds of voting tomorrow. So if further rounds are needed, they will be held on Thursday. Now at this point, we're going to quickly move into the candidate campaign finance section. And this is a section that is required, and I will review the campaign expenses and contributions in the alphabetical order of the candidates. So again, I'm just going to do a quick slide share. So one moment. So this is just a very quick presentation on the campaign expenses for the various candidates. As the charter states, the limit for expenditures by each candidate for election purposes is no more than $35,000. On the day prior to the election, which happens to be today, each candidate shall submit a certified preliminary statement of campaign expenses and the names of contributors to the Chief Electoral Officer in sufficient time to inform the all candidates open forum and all of you. Each of the candidates did in fact meet the requirements of the charter, and I will now show the contributions and expenses from each of the candidates. We have the 7 candidates and their contributions and expenses. I'm not going to read each line. I'll just leave this slide open for a moment and let you have a look. Just after this, we will go directly into the candidate forum. The candidate forum was slated to go until 9 p.m. tonight. I'm recognizing that we are behind schedule, so we will work towards lengthening the evening a little bit and shortening the period for questions and answers for the candidates. I know that the candidates have spoken at many regional meetings, but we do feel that this is an important time for the candidates to have something to say to each of you present now. Okay. I'm going to stop the share screen and we'll move into the candidate forum. So just a quick introduction on the forum and some of the rules. Candidates will have 20 minutes to address the First Nations in assembly. A timer will be seen on the screen, similar to the timer that you saw during the breaks, and candidates will be warned at 5 minutes left and 2 minutes left, with the timer changing colors. Candidates are not required to use the entire 20 minutes and can complete their address in less time if they so choose. After all the candidates have spoken, we will begin a question and answer period of approximately an hour. But let's see what our timing looks like at that point. Any chief or proxy who wishes to pose a question to a specific candidate or to all the candidates may raise their hand in the Zoom platform when that chat section, question and answer period begins. Those on the phone must use the *9 to raise their hand, and questions will be asked directly by the chief or proxy, and those chiefs and proxies asking a question have up to 2 minutes in length to ask that question, but I really encourage you to be very brief. And candidates have answers maybe up to 3 minutes in length. Any candidate may choose to answer the question or pass. When a question is posed to a specific candidate, I will allow any of the candidates to chime in on that question if they so choose. So the session, as I said, we hope to finish at 9 o'clock. We'll probably push it a little bit. All rules of order for the AGA apply to this session. And I should note that the speaking order of the candidates was drawn in their presence in a random order this morning. So just to go over the order, it will be first up, Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. Second will be Reginald Bellerose. Third, Dr. Kathy Martin. Fourth, Kevin T. Hart. Fifth, Lee Crowchild. Sixth, Roseanne Archibald. Seventh, Alvin Fiddler. So before we begin and open the floor to Jody, I just want to state and take a moment to raise my hands really to each of the candidates for seeking to stand to represent and take on this important role. It takes a lot of courage and commitment, and no matter the outcome, I think we should all appreciate their efforts. So at this time, I'd like to call upon Jody Calahoo Stonehouse for their statement. And Jody, if you're there, please go ahead. You're muted.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me? Danse, Sego, Kapapamas Gamganaka Square, Nitsiga Sun, Otsinia, Michelle First Nation, Nia Horanashoni, Nehiawa Square. Greetings, Chief. My name is Jody Callahan Stonehouse. I'm from the Michelle First Nation in Treaty 6 territory here in Alberta. I want to give thanks to Creator for this day. I want to thank the Elder for opening us up in a good way and for the drums and the beautiful songs. I give thanks for each of you, Chiefs, and to all the Chiefs who attended our Zoom meetings, our forums, our phone calls, and for those of you who made time to give me advice. I listened to your suggestions and I heard you. Thank you. And to those Chiefs I have not met yet, I look forward to meeting you and spending time in your territories. I give thanks to the elders and the knowledge keepers who have guided me on this journey. And I give thanks for having had the privilege to sit with my fellow candidates who have demonstrated integrity, devotion, and leadership throughout this entire campaign. I have learned many things from each of them, and I thank you. My prayers and my heart go out to our nations as we are currently battling wildfires. We are in a state of emergency at the national level. And it is our responsibility to ensure that emergency operation plans are supported and that we are advocating for your needs. We have heard that an entire town has been wiped out. We must collectively come together as nations to support the rebuilding of their lands, of their nations. We are in unprecedented times. We must do things differently than we have ever done before. Now more than ever, we need strong, competent leadership. We need a comprehensive plan to organize, strategize, and mobilize all possible supports and services necessary to uplift and support our chiefs in assembly as in turn so they are able to support their nation's citizens during times of crisis like the ones we are seeing. We are collectively feeling a deep sadness. A deep wound has been exposed by the finding of the bodies of our relatives that never made it home from the Indian residential schools. The finding of our children, of our relatives, have brought to surface the genocide that our peoples has endured over decades, and it has reminded us of the negligence of the testimonies of our survivors and the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Chiefs, I want to acknowledge that you have the hardest job in this country. You are leading a group of peoples coming out of genocide who are continuously re-victimized and re-traumatized. At the Assembly, we must support you. We must have multiple approaches to do this. Firstly, we have to ensure that chiefs have access to tools, resources, ceremonial support, prayer support, and all methods possible to help lift our people and our survivors and our intergenerational survivors as we heal. Secondly, at the national office, we must support the resolution and organize a legal framework on positions so that you can move forward in your claims around crimes against humanity, apartheid, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, violations on human rights, and the International Criminal Court. We have a small moment in time to take action, chiefs. Our role at the national office is to ensure that you have all the legal possibilities presented to you so that you may collectively or individually move forward in taking action. The state and the church will be held accountable to this abhorrent treatment of our people. I want to say hi to Cook B. Casimir and Cook B. Wilson for bringing forward this resolution today, and to all the chiefs for their amendments. The good words were shared, and so was clear instruction. We are a beautiful, strong, kind, and loving people. We will heal, and we will ensure that we see justice for our loved ones at the national and the international level. At the Assembly, we must also prepare frameworks for regional and local accountability to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. This is also imperative work we must do together. The global pandemic has also had many devastating impacts in our communities due to overcrowded houses, health disparities, and our people, 51 nations, have boil water advisories, lack of access to clean drinking water. I spoke with chiefs who have up to 15 people living in an individual home. Outbreaks of bed bugs, Some of our communities are like third world conditions. This is shameful in a country that is one of the most richest countries in the world. We don't know if this pandemic will end, and we don't know if similar ones are to come. But we do know how to best protect our communities and how to keep ourselves as safe as possible. We have witnessed that there are global food systems that are very fragile, including our own. At the national level, we must prepare a strategy how we might create a seed bank of non-GMO seeds, as many of our nations have begun across the country. We must share these seeds, this knowledge of growing our own food and drawing on our ancestral knowledge systems. We must take action and we must work together to ensure we are prepared. Climate change, as we know, is impacting our people as we are out on the lands and we see it with our own eyes. Therefore, it's impacting our inherent and treaty rights. We must prepare a strategy to protect them collectively and individually. We know that we are part of the solution, having been experts on this lands since time immemorial. We must ensure that we have plans about kinds of economic developments that take place on our lands. We must move towards responsible and sustainable development. We must lead the way in shifting towards a greener economy and hold the Canadian state and industry to the same standards that we want to see in our territories. We must have a plan to help First Nations think through the transition towards a post-carbon future. We must invest and commit in renewable energy that is viable for our nations. More recently, Bill C-12 was passed to Royal Ascension, the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. What is our position on this piece of legislation? What is the Chiefs and Assembly's position? Last December, the Government of Canada launched consultations on the new water agency to ensure clean, reliable fresh water to Canadians and the Canadian economy. Have our Chiefs and Assembly been consulted by the Canadian state? Do we have a national collective position on the matters that we need to be consulted on as a priority? We must supersede all other consultations in this country. We have a right to our own water that must be recognized. It is imperative at the national office that we prepare all the research, the data, and the potential positions that you and the Chief and Assemblies can choose to make the best decisions possible in the coming issues that face your nation. As the national chief, I will be a strong and unifying force, amplifying your voices on all of the issues that are important to our people and bringing us together to do the work that is expected of us as leaders. I will work with you to empower our sovereign nationhood, and together we will return the AFN to serving the original vision the Chiefs had when they founded our organization. As National Chief, I will make sure that the Assembly of First Nations serves its intended functions to create solidarity and cooperation among First Nations across this country. Advocate and defend our inherent and treaty rights as First Peoples on Turtle Island. Additionally, it is imperative that the Assembly of First Nations brings accountability, transparency, and good governance to all our operations. We must envision innovative strategies to accomplish our common goals. Data sovereignty and a digital plan is imperative. However, we must also focus on our energy on how we can support our remote communities with infrastructure, ensuring that no nation is left behind. Communication is critical now more than ever, and we can do this effectively and efficiently by building our own data sovereignty. Our internal resolution process needs some update and some love. We need a tool that demonstrates the issue in the resolution, where there are alignments with other resolutions that have come forward, what movement has been made on that resolution, were discussions had with ministers, was there funding allocated to that nation and or to the Assembly? Was the resolution resolved, and what are the next steps? You need to be able to see this resolution data on screen in real time. We must also evaluate our outcomes, both successful and unsuccessful resolutions. That way, the chiefs in assembly know what are the lessons learned, what needs to be improved, and what are our next steps. Why am I here? When I was 15 years old, I had a dream, and I went and told my grade 8 social studies class that I would be the first woman to be the national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. And the kids laughed at me, so I never forgot my dream. And I started working towards it ever since. My chop-on was Johnny Callahoo. He was part of the League of Indians, which then became the Indian Association of Alberta. And I have his papers, his documentation, as he wrote about why he and his colleagues at the time, other chiefs, would illegally take the train to Ottawa because of the treatment that they were, at this time, they were starving. They were having difficult times with the settlers in this territory, and they were taking the train to make a difference. We need to make sure that our grandchildren don't have to fight the same fight that we are as our grandparents. We need to see systemic change. We need to make a difference. My reserve, they found gravel. We are located next to a major city, and they discovered gravel in 1958. And they essentially starved the Indians off the land, which meant we were dispossessed of our lands. I grew up attending meetings with my grandfather, my mother, and going to Indian claims commissions, court proceedings, and never did my elders ever see any sort of reconciliation. We grew up without a land. I want to ensure that no First Nations young person never has a community to go home to. We must work together to ensure that our lands, our rights, our water, and our people are protected. I do not take this decision lightly. I have been preparing myself for a very long time. I started a post-secondary journey. I did a BA in Native Studies, went on to study a master's in science, and looked at contamination of water downstream from the Alberta oil sands. I also studied social innovation, which is a way of solving complex problems. You see, they say there are 3 kinds of problems: a simple problem, a complicated problem, and a complex problem. A simple problem is baking a cake. We can all have the ingredients, a stove, and make something that relatively looks like a cake. A complicated problem is going to the moon. If we have the engineers, the tools, everything we need, we can get to the moon. A complex problem is coming out of genocide and trying to bring our children home. We are interwoven into a web of systems such It was there I learned about the systems of bureaucracy and how we can use those systems to utilize our own systems and lift our own systems for accountability and transparency. I worked with international Indigenous peoples as we brought the World Indigenous Nations Games to Edmonton, Alberta, with former Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner, Chief Wilton Littlechild. We had to organize how to get seeds, feathers, sacred items from all over the world here in Edmonton. More recently, I've been a commissioner with the Edmonton Police Commission. I felt it was important to study the system of policing. As we see the devolution of authority coming from the Canadian state and then allocate power and jurisdiction to the provinces, we must be prepared to take on the authority and jurisdiction of policing. We must have strategies for peacekeeping in our nations and build capacity. This is important work that lies ahead. I also did work in film and TV, Milpa Matsuan Productions. We won multiple awards in Sydney, Australia, as well as down in the States, Washington, DC, for our films on reconciliation and our films on the 60s scoop. I'm currently the executive director of Yellowhead Indigenous Education Foundation, where we are building an Indigenous Innovation Lab at Yellowhead Tribal College. And we are also building land-based, language-based curriculum in our nations. All the major work that I've done in my institutions, all the work I've done at grassroots levels, advocating for our homeless, working with our young women and young men, getting them off the streets, all my time spent in ceremony with elders, all the times I've been blessed to travel to remote communities and be on the land harvesting, has provided me with the skill set necessary to support you best as National Chief. Our languages, our cultures, our ceremonies, our land-based practices have ensured the survival of our nations over the generations. Our people have faced many challenges in the long history of this land, and we have survived and thrived by listening to the wisdom of our ancestors and using our own intelligence to innovate and adapt to changing times and to the new realities of the day. Our ancestors gave us the cultural and the spiritual tools we need to survive, and more than that, to take our rightful place as First Nations in this country. In our recovery for the latest challenges that we are facing, we must lift our pipes, we must sing our songs, we must dance our dances, and pray in the ways that Creator has gifted us. And then we have to put in the work as human beings who love our nations and who care about the future generations who are yet to rise from the earth. And we must strengthen ourselves and make a better future for our nations. It is time for us to be innovative, resourceful, and proactive. We are at a moment in time where it is crucial that we work together and lift each other up as we begin a new phase in our nations with hope, with love, with compassion, with kindness, and with love at the forefront. The seeds, chiefs, that we plant today are for the next 7 generations. So let's plant them wisely. Nyawagoa, hai hai, nanaskaman.
Thank you very much, Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. At this time, before introducing Reginald Bellerose, I just want to take a moment and state that we'll try to catch up with some of the comments in the chat box. Our staff will only post in between candidates so we don't distract, but just so you know, and at this point I will introduce the second speaker, Reginald Bellerose. Reginald, if you are online, please unmute yourself. Not seeing Reginald. We're not seeing Reginald in the Zoom meeting at the moment, so we will endeavor to seek where Reginald Bellerose may be. Nope, here I think we might have Reginald. I see a hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Greetings to the chiefs. Reginald Bellerose. We're going to show a video here. If we could load the video, take a few moments. Appreciate it. While we're doing that, I want to acknowledge the chiefs of Canada, the proxies, the elders, the veterans, the youth, the women, the LGBTQ plus community, everybody that's listening in across the country. as this day has come. It's been a long journey to get here. Just wanted to share some important thoughts before we get to the video. We thought we had everything set. And acknowledging, video can go?
We have no audio on that video at the moment. Just to state that we don't have audio at the moment.
Hello, my name is Hello, my name is Chief Terrence Paul, and I have been Chief of Member 2 for the past 37 years. I have nominated Reg Bellarose because I have worked with him in partnership, seen his work, and I trust his capabilities. He has committed to bringing our nations together for united actions to move our nations forward. He has the experience, the network, the trusted capabilities to move the Indigenous agenda forward for all of us. He has committed to listen to the chiefs of Canada and to have their voices heard, acknowledged, and responded to by the federal government. He has committed to working with all chiefs across Canada to listen to their concerns, unite all nations, and find solutions while working with the federal government to demand change with and for our many nations. I trust Chief Reginald Bellarose to lead us in the right direction. I respect his proven work as 17 years as chief. I will be voting for Reginald Bellarose on July 7th for the next national chief of the AFN, and I ask you to join me in voting for Reg.
I want to greet all of our chiefs across the country, of course, our proxies, Elders Council, Women's Council, Youth Council. And I want to also thank the elder for the opening prayer. My name is Darcy Bear. I'm the chief of the Whitecap Dakota First Nation, and I'm seconding Reg's nomination for national chief. I've known Reg for 17 years here in Saskatchewan. He's been a leader of his community in Muskowgan. I've had the opportunity to serve on many provincial boards with Chief Bellarose, including SIGA, as well as SIT and SciTag. And I believe as First Nation leaders across this country, and of course our councils, our communities, we all know our local issues, we know our regional issues, our national issues, our international issues. And Reg's experience as a chief is going to benefit him in this position as national chief. So I ask you tomorrow to join me in voting for Chief Reg Bellarose for national chief. Thank you.
Chiefs, want to start with something pretty important. I want to show you a Treaty 4 belt. This belt is Treaty 4 commitments from the Crown. For as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, the rivers flow. That is Treaty 4. In this belt, you do not see the Indian Act. You do not see residential school. You do not see the foot on the throat of our people for 100 and some years. So this, I wanted to share our story from Treaty 4. I have this for my journey, gifted from an elder who wanted to remind me to stay grounded no matter where I go, what I do. I want to take some time to a special individual to me, Eugene Arcan, asked me to share these pictures from his experience at the Duck Lake Residential School. These are important images that we should not forget about. And I made a commitment to him that I'd raise these important photos. And in these photos, what he shared, the stories, is that some of the boys are always holding their hands behind their back because they were strapped so badly they didn't want to show their hands. So this is what I wanted to raise today to start the introduction. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, another gift that was loaned to me. As we move into this critical time in the country, Article 71 to 76 of this commission calls for action on the unmarked graves and the missing children. What we need to do in Canada is we need to strengthen these calls to action. They're not there to be just read and disregarded. Articles 71 to 76 call on all agencies, whether it's federal or provinces, to release the information of our loved ones and our relatives. From those articles, we shift into the patriarchal imposition that we're in. We need to shift that to the matriarchal priorities. The women need to come forward and they need to be strong for our nations. And the best way that I see us moving in that direction is by looking at calls to action 1 to 5, the modern day residential school, which is child welfare. It's still separating children from families. And in this strategy, we need to protect and return the children back to the nations. Right now, the children, they're a commodity. The children create jobs in the provinces. That's why there's hesitancy to let go of that authority. The children, the women, the families, the nations. Calls to action 21 calls for investment in wellness centers. We need to get well. We need to bring our communities together. And the only way we do it is by engaging our elders, our knowledge keepers, not by treatment, not by anything like that, but by our elders. So this is a really important time right now, Chiefs. And when I visited and chatted and discussed this opportunity, I kept getting one question is, why in the heck do you want to go from where you were to this job? That's a fair question. The second question is, do you know what you're getting into? That's another fair question. So what I want to let the Chiefs of Canada know is it's very well understood with me what I'm getting into and why I am the right candidate for this job. And the 6 other candidates, They're great people. We've worked together over the years. I want to ensure that that friendship continues. But when you look at this role, it's not to divide. It's not to play games. It's not to pit region against another region. What I'm promoting is a common agenda with a united vision, a common agenda with a united vision, chiefs. As we come together to do what? To force the federal government to influence federal legislation, to demand that the federal legislation be changed. Chiefs, as we come together, we will be a force. And the best way to demonstrate to the people that we lead is let's work together. By working together, the funding challenges, the housing challenges, the child welfare challenges, all of those challenges, they will start to fall into place. And will it happen right away? I sure hope so. If I'm elected, I have a day one strategy. I'm not going to wait a month, 2 months, 6 months. I'm going to get right to work. And as we understand, what I can do is demonstrate through my time as leader. And when you say I've been there 17 years, that doesn't mean it was easy. That doesn't mean leadership, you just get up and everyone pats you on the back and greets you. A lot of times there's hostility that we face as leaders. And online bullying, cyber bullying, lateral violence, chiefs, we face all of that. But why I overcome all of that is because I'm a political survivor. Election after election after election, same old thing. He's bad, he's doing this, and I get put there. Continuing to serve the people because this is what I love to do. This is what I was born to do. And when you think about serving the people, what do you want to do? You want to help? You want to see something better? You definitely want to believe in what you're doing. And in my time in the elected chair of the nation, working provincially, I want to let you know that I've been educated in the FSIN Assembly, in the AFN Assembly. Those education, that education that I got, you cannot learn in a university. As we start to move into tomorrow, there's a couple key commitments that I want to make here this afternoon. And one of them is on fisheries. Fisheries is so critical to many nations that I want to create a standalone fisheries portfolio nationally because it's so important. I'm no expert in it, but we will find chiefs and leaders who are experts. And as we move into that critical time, we need to call the chiefs together and support those nations who are having challenges with fishing. Extinct species is an extinction of a right. And as species start to become extinct, so do our rights. And that's why when I look at gaming, another day one commitment I have is we have chiefs who are pushing for jurisdiction on gaming. And by that jurisdiction, we need to get the provinces out of our business. We can create a structure where chiefs can come together, those that are interested in online gaming, on actual casinos. The reason is the collective approach is that the province is in all of our business. And as we get into this, I want to say this. If the Crown wants to see transformational change in the relationship with the Indigenous peoples, the following must be done. Truth, restitution, restoration, then reconciliation. nation-to-nation relationship and trade, inherent right to economies, special consideration for the northern nations, much-needed infrastructure, food security, housing issues. And the one thing I'll say about the North that I've been very pleased to help and support is $1 in Saskatoon is not the same dollar needed in the North. Fly-in communities, northern communities with road access, northern communities, the cost of living is so high. Water and lands is very important to the nations. And as we move into this collective work that I'm promoting, what I really hope is that the chiefs will support me tomorrow, vote for me, and then as we move into the day one strategy, fisheries, gaming, the gatherings for the residential school, so we can bring the impacted nations together and decide how we're going to approach the crown. And I really believe those impacted nations need a special designation for the lands, the highest designation in the country that always will remember. The country will always remember what those policies were and what they did to our people. And, you know, in a very emotional way, it's not easy work. It's going to be difficult work, but through our treaty and inherent rights, our rights and jurisdiction, our economic ability to generate our own revenue, our own jobs, health and wellness, residential school, all of those provincial encroachments, they all get bundled up and we deal with them and we move ahead. As elders have shared with me in our treaty gatherings that we've had, two things are important. One is unity. The second is we need to make our own laws and then implement those laws. That's nation work. What I'm committing as your next national chief is if you do not want me in your business, I will get out of the way. Those First Nations that want me there, need the support, they're asking for it, I will be there. But one of the most important resources that we have is our children. And right now, through sports, culture, and recreation, our children are being left out of leagues. They're being cut from teams. Beardy's Blackhawks was cut out of the AAA Midget Hockey League in Saskatchewan. Our athletes are not being able to participate. We need to come together to ensure that our children have a safe place to play. We have Ethan Bear, we have Bridget Laquette, and I'm very positive we have other athletes that great. But they're sitting on the bench or they're cut from the team. So Chiefs of Canada, I'm asking us to stand up and support our youth, support our children. Let's push the federal government to make real impacting change, not for one day, but for a lasting amount of time. And as I said earlier, this job is not easy. It won't be easy, but if we come together, the strength that we have will be like I've never felt. So in a very humble way, I want to thank you for your time listening. We have our sites, we have our channels. So to the Cree people, Tanse, Suro, Anin Sigwa, Wakuma Gantik, Pia Sugawi Tamat Nitsigason, Maskaugenoche, Nanaskumon, hi.
Thank you very much, Reginald Bellerose. At this point, I will call upon Dr. Kathy Martin to speak. Please go ahead.
Okay. Willigistic Ebsidwen, Delawazi Kathy Martin, Listugush Deleoi Akwigi. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Kathy Martin, National Chief Candidate from the Listugush Micmac Nation. Before I begin, I really like to express my mixed emotions about the timing of the APTN National Chief election. As you know, our First Nations are currently in crisis, and we need to acknowledge the trauma and re-traumatization of our families, communities, and nations with the recovering of the 1,500 children who are victims of the residential institutions across this country. And in addition, currently, our brothers and sisters in British Columbia are battling widespread fire, loss, amidst extreme heat conditions. And not to mention our First Nation communities are still at various levels within this pandemic. And in addition, the realities of the virtual election present many difficulties in and of itself. So my thoughts and energies are truly with our nations during this challenging time. I realize many of our chiefs are in survival mode for their communities at this moment. Thus, it's not an optimal time for an election. However, it is during this critical time that strong and sensible leadership is needed. That being said, this election for a national chief is not about celebration and honor, but rather a time for humbleness and responsibility. So thank you for listening for that. And I'd like to take an opportunity to tell you a bit about myself as a candidate for national chief. So in addition to being a grassroots politician, I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm also an academic. I was raised and resided most of my life in the Listugush-Micmac First Nation. I have a doctorate degree in educational leadership from the University of Phoenix, but as well, I remain receptive and respectful of our traditional knowledge holders. I am currently an elected member of council for the Listugush-Micmac government, and I've been involved in politics for over 20 years, both with traditional politics and elected politics. I previously served 2 terms as the elected chief councillor. I currently remain the council representative for the Tri-Council of the Micmac of the Gaspésie. And as such, I sat on the Micmac Constitution Building Committee for the Micmac Nation of Gaspé. I continue to uphold productive communications with our Micmac Hereditary Chief of the 7th District Council. I'm also a published author. I launched my latest publication, Strengthening Canadian Indigenous Relations and Decision-Making Processes, in June of 2019. I wrote this book as a tool based on research, intrinsic of my own personal political experiences, in combination with scientific research on successful implementation of community-driven plans. This book is a contrast of holistic and hierarchical value systems and offers framework solutions for helping improve not only the intergovernmental relationships, but professional relationships within our communities and within ourselves as First Nation politicians. The solutions presented in my book are frameworks that I designed to address the unique needs of and diversity within each of our First Nation communities for addressing issues with a community-driven approach. As national chief, these frameworks and my skills will be beneficial in guiding the chief's discussions by allowing them to create solutions for the issues unique to their diverse needs, as well as address the national issues we face as First Nations. Since my nomination in mid-May, I've been sending bi-weekly emails to the majority of the chiefs. Included in there were some 2 short-minute videos on a number of topics. I also included in those emails a copy of my resume for the chiefs to review, so you can review my competencies and see my political accomplishments, how many boards and committees I sit on, my volunteer efforts at the grassroots level. It has a detail of my education and awards, and it has a detail of my work experience. So you can see that I have worked in Canada coast to coast, providing presentations. I've worked in every province in this country, mainly in First Nation communities, delivering workshops and different things. So that's for your review, so I don't have to explain a lot of that in this limited time presentation. So the 2 short-minute, the short 2-minute videos, I should say, included a number of topics. So I'm just going to briefly read through the topics that I've included. And I spoke about inclusivity and its importance, systemic racism, wellness in our communities, effective communication as the AFN chief, influencing legislation, implementing change, building relationships, and the economy. And so I'd like to highlight a few of these topics today. And the first is I'll talk about is systemic racism. And the reason I choose systemic racism is because the majority of issues we currently face as First Nation people are based on systems developed to exclude and control us by external governments and organizations. Systemic racism is the underlying cause of the majority of common issues we face as First Nation people in Canada. It includes everything from underfunded service programs to blatantly racially motivated actions against our people by justice, security, and external governments. Systemic racism is evident at all levels of government and within organizations that interact with us. Our people continue to suffer the injustices that result from frontline workers in health, justice, education, as well as in the public service sector. And even more disturbing, systemic racism exists with decision makers who unilaterally develop regulations with their perspective of resource management. So that is why it's so important for our people to have input and be at the decision-making tables with upper-level policymakers, not to negotiate what's already ours, but to increase the understanding of our inherent rights and cultural practices, and to provide meaningful input to policy and legislation within the provinces and Canada. And even more important is the conveyance of respect that we are all diverse First Nations who have been grouped in terms of legislation, but we are diverse nations with diverse needs, cultural practices, and rights. The century and a half of systemic racism has significantly impacted the well-being of our nations. Rates of suicide remain high, addictions are increasing, mental health, depression, and lateral violence is rampant in our communities. And many of our First Nation languages are facing extinction. These are without a doubt the result of intergenerational trauma experienced by our ancestors at the hands of external governments that imposed and accepted systems of racism against our people. And there is no greater reminder of this than the recent horrific discovery of the 1,500 plus unrecorded burials of children who were stolen from their families, kept in residential schools, abused physically, emotionally, sexually, and murdered. Healing is needed in our communities to restore wellness. The rediscovery of our lost children has finally given the validation to the voices of our ancestors and survivors of Canada's residential institutions. Apologies are not enough, and accountability from the Canadian government and the Christian churches is essential for our healing processes. Liability discussions need to be had. Our relationship with Canada has always been just a legal one. Agreements and treaties are embedded in the Constitution. Now, with the horrific proof, discussions of liability need to be had to implement the healing that comes from us for us. Healing must come from within, not externally. We can't rely on external governments to solve our problems. However, having the Canadian government and the Christian churches accept the responsibility for their actions is vital to our healing processes. And the AFN can help assure accountability measures are implemented. And we also need to start to unravel the systemic racism found in the current legislation and modern day treaty processes. The Assembly of First Nations, through the National Chief, can bring to light our rights as inherent title holders to our unceded lands and resources by promoting appreciation and recognition of our legal rights and history, not only with Canada, but also with the Crown, with whom many of our nations already have established historic treaties. The current modern day treaty negotiation system being implemented is colonialistic, whereas it denies our nations the liberty to discuss amongst our nations or with other First Nations who have been through similar processes. This process of secrecy and exclusion is of little to no benefit for our First Nations and does not respect our values of inclusivity, responsibility, and 7-generational planning. So in our efforts to address systemic racism, we often target the results. We look at the lower levels. We start to target inadequate housing, water, infrastructures, education, health, and other services. And we target the results of maltreatment of our people by institutions of justice and security. And as such, we tend to lobby for increased funding, recognition, and inclusion in service agreements. But what we really need to discuss at the Assembly is addressing the systems. The systemic racism is at the root, which is at the legislation level that was developed by the external provincial and federal governments with little or no recognition of our treaty rights. Our treaties and unceded territories are the foundation for which Canada was built. Our treaties supersede legislation. And in order to get this recognized, we need to continue to assert our inherent rights to our lands and resources in the laws of the land that we have followed since time immemorial. We're not breaking any laws, but rather demonstrating how exclusion of us in Canadian lawmaking creates conflict. Another suggestion I offer for the chiefs to consider stems from my value of inclusivity. I'm suggesting that the chiefs reevaluate the charter of the AFN that was adopted in 1985 in its original intent. The Assembly of First Nations is just that, an assembly. It's an organization that was designed to allow us to gather and to discuss the issues we face as First Nation, while respecting the individuality and diversity of each nation. And within the Charter, tolerance and respect are the foundations for coming together to strengthen and maintain our inherent rights and traditions, while we work with other governments to continue closing the gap between our nations and mainstream Canadians. But I also believe that there is no better time than now to begin forming alliances between our traditional governing systems and our elected governing systems within each nation. I think of us in terms of sweetgrass, as we are all rooted in the lands of our nation. And when we braid sweetgrass, it creates strength, both spiritually and physically. In our communities, we are of all the same nation, in which the imposition of an elected governing system has caused a divide. And both our traditional and elected governments have legal recognition, and forming alliances will only strengthen our power as First Nations. So I think it's time to have discussions to redefine and realign the Assembly of First Nations to ensure inclusivity when discussing ways to promote the political, economic, and social advancement of our individual sovereign nations. So the strategic approach that I'm advocating for as National Chief is based again on my research, intrinsic of my own political experiences, in combination with the scientific research on successful implementation of community-driven plans. My specialty as a curriculum developer is taking any goal and objective from here and bringing it to realization over here in a step-by-step process that entails rights holders' inputs, stakeholders' inputs, our community members, our elected and traditional governing bodies, our elders, and it has consideration of the effects on the surrounding communities, considerations of our urban indigenous, our resources and environment, our legislations, financial implications, and future generations. So my strategies for frameworks is based on research, and they're found within my publication, Strengthening Canadian Indigenous Relations. So do I have all the answers how to address things? Absolutely not. But I know where the answers lay. And the answers lay within each and every First Nation community in this country. And the AFN can help by developing frameworks that address the specific issues that are inclusive of each diverse nation's input and in consideration of all factors involved. So let me explain how we can get started once elected as National Chief. We can begin by hosting a special assembly at the end of summer or early fall. And the first topic that we need to discuss at this assembly is a discussion on Canada's genocide actions. We also need to discuss addressing the structural needs of the AFN. We need to evaluate the charter. We need to look at the regional chiefs and the executive and the subcommittees and see how this all fits together. We need to start some legislation reform, targeting systems and determining priorities of how we are going to do that and which systems we're going to target first. We can discuss building relationships within community and between First Nations and external governments. And within this initial General Assembly, we can begin by responding to legislation such as Bill 96, C10, UNDRIP, Bill C92, or any other bill that the Assembly has concerns about. So in closing, let me say that I'm blessed to be amongst the 7 candidates offering for National Chief. We all have passion and we all have strong leadership skills. But this election is not about us, the candidates. It's not about our visions and our dreams. The election is about every First Nation person in this country, as they are represented by you, their elected chiefs of this nation. As chiefs, you are tasked with the decision to cast your vote, to decide who will best represent your voice and your decisions, and to decide who can best convey your collective message to the external governments and Canadians. Decide who can best facilitate prosperity and economic growth within our nations. You need to decide who can best advocate for community wellness, health, security, education, environment, social issues. You need to decide who can best preserve and inform about our inherent rights, our historical treaties, and the modern day treaty process, and who can best represent and serve as a role model with traditional holistic values. So my goal entering in this election has always been to gain the ear of the chiefs and to share my gifts and knowledge for the betterment of our nations. This campaign process has been both exhilarating and humbling. And I'm ready to accept that challenge, dedication, and determination to facilitate and implement the direction of you, our chiefs. But despite the results of the vote, I remain thankful for the experience, as this election is not about me. It's about the population of First Nation people in this country that you represent. Walaliok.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kathy Martin. At this point, I will move on to our 4th speaker, which will be Kevin T. Hart, who will be introduced by Chief David Monias and Chief Donald Miracle. Please go ahead, Chief David Monias. Monias, sorry.
That's it. My name's David Monias. I am the Chief of the Nation for Pimicikamak, also known as Cross Lake, Band of Indians. I just wanted to introduce Kevin Hart. He's been with the AFN Manitoba Regional Chief for 6 years. And I've known Kevin for quite a while. He used to work with us at Manitoba Kiwetno Gimaganak as one of our technicians and political advisors to the Grand Chief at that time. And he was also an experienced advisor in the provincial Manitoba Legislative Assembly. So he comes with some experience in the provincial system, governance system, as well as in our Indigenous provincial territorial organization. And well-versed in First Nations issues, well-versed in the disparaging and also the emerging issues that continue to plague our people. Like, for instance, like he worked on homelessness for our people who work with us on that, and for people in Winnipeg, not just in the community, but also in officer-served urban areas. And he was also one of the people that we counted on to work with us with a team on First Nations policing when we were trying to develop our policing. So he did a lot of political advocacy and did a lot of analyzing the policies that were out there, and brought that knowledge back to the Grand Chief and also to the chiefs in the Northern Manitoba, and also to myself as the executive director at that time. So I'm well versed in terms of his ability, his skills that he can do. I think, you know, he brought a lot of money to Manitoba as a portfolio holder for the AFN Assembly as a regional chief. He worked in the things that we worked on was child welfare, Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, Jordan's Principles, social development, murder and missing women, housing. So all these experiences that he has, I think that what, you know, he's been able to acquire that experience for him to be able to have the ability to carry a secretariat like Assembly of First Nations. Well, he does know that the AFN is not a rights holder. He doesn't forget that who he reports to and who he's accountable to. For myself, as a First Nations and also as a Indigenous leader, we had a lot of conversations in terms of what was available for our community, and he was able to communicate with me quite a bit, and I'm sure that he can do the same thing for the rest of Canada, Canadian Indigenous leaders. So to me, I think that Kevin's the right candidate for the Assembly of First Nations National Chief. He's a workhorse. He works hard. He has really good support at home. I give credit to his wife, because you know, how can you have somebody sell or pawn their engagement ring to support his husband to be able to travel and go somewhere to do his work? You know, his wife told a story that she had to wake him up in the middle of the night to come to bed because he's 3 o'clock in the morning, he's still working. So I think that he's a hardworking man. He's a father, and he's also a husband. And North Manitoba man for me, I think it's really good virtues. We're all North Manitobas. So good men there and good women. But anyways, I just want to say, vote for Kevin Hart. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Chief Miracle.
Good evening, everyone. I bring greetings and wish to thank our National Chief Perry Bellegarde for all of his years of service and for all the work that he's done, and wish him my very best wishes in his future endeavors. Bring greetings to the chiefs, the proxies, the elders, our First Nation citizens, our young people, and all the AFN staff and those who work in our PTO officers in our regions. I have the great honor to second the nomination of Kevin Hart for the position of National Chief. I worked with Kevin on the Chiefs Committee on Housing, Water, and Infrastructure, and have always been impressed with his grassroots leadership style. He's always been very prompt and courteous. He gets along well with others. He adds humor to the meetings, and he's very dedicated to the work that he does. Kevin Hart is a compassionate, dedicated, passionate, determined, and experienced leader with the many facets of experience that are needed now to address the many issues that our communities are faced with. He's committed to getting results on the current issues that face so many of our First Nations citizens in Canada today. Kevin has 25 years of political experience, and he knows how laws and policies are made because he's worked for a cabinet minister as an assistant in the Manitoba legislature. In his work as regional chief, Kevin has worked tirelessly and has been a strong advocate for housing, water, infrastructure, social development, child welfare, Jordan's Principle, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. He's worked with Transport Canada and the Canada Emergency Management. He's worked with the Women's Council and worked with on the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Kevin knows only too well the impacts of colonialism. He understands the issues that face our people that stem from racism, neglect, and poverty. He understands the impact of climate change, the fires, the floods that have damaged so many homes, community infrastructure, and lives in our First Nations. Kevin has been a tireless advocate, working to get our First Nations the infrastructure that they so desperately need. As the chair of the APTN Chiefs Committee on Housing, Water, and Infrastructure, Kevin has championed a $6 billion in new investments in budget 2021, $4.3 billion for water and infrastructure, and $1.7 billion for ongoing operation and maintenance over 5 years. Kevin recognizes that the COVID-19 impact has impacted the cost of building homes in our community, and that many of our young people and community members will be challenged in affordability to find shelter and build homes that are so desperately needed. As well as his political experience, importantly, Kevin has experienced poverty. He currently is homeless after his home burned down. 4 days later, he was advocating for the things that our people need in our communities. He's a residential school survivor. He's well grounded in the Indigenous culture, and he understands the First Nations struggles for access to basic necessities of life, such as shelter, safe drinking water, and most importantly, he understands the necessity of keeping First Nations children at home with their families. I believe Kevin will be an informed, strong advocate, always keeping our issues in the forefront of the ministers to get the resources that are so desperately needed to close the gap, to improve the quality of life, and to have our rights recognized and implemented. Kevin is committed to getting results and the investments to meet the priorities that the chief set and those of our First Nations communities. And I'm honored to second his nomination for the position of National Chief. And I ask for your support for Kevin as National Chief in the election. Goa.
Nanjayin Tutumat. I want to bring greetings to you from the beautiful Treaty 1 territory here on the Saugeen First Nation. I want to first acknowledge the protocol for First Nation, as well as the prayers that were offered up this morning. I bring you greetings as the former regional chief for the Assembly of First Nations for Manitoba. First off, I want to raise my hands up to our relatives in BC, namely our relatives in the Kamloops, as well as across the country. We see the findings of the unmarked graves and our little ones that have been affected by a genocidal system that impacted us as First Nations since we first made contact, since colonialism has been created and passed down upon us. For the work that I've done in the past 25 years, I've reached out to try and break down barriers for us as First Nations people, both working and breaking down these barriers to be able to work directly in provincial governments as a minister assistant at the highest level, where we learned how legislation, laws, and policies affect us and how governments work each and every day. We all know leaders, chiefs, cook bees across this country right now that our rights are being violated each and every day. That governments do not have the best interests of First Nations at the tables. You know, these are benchmarks I want to raise as your next national chief to ensure that the voices for you as the leaders of the day are heard at each and every level, whether it's at the municipal government, whether it's at the provincial government, whether it's at the federal government. This notion of delegated authority has to stop. Our sovereignty and jurisdiction is being violated each and every day. I've seen it fighting the Canadian government when we fight for our children at the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. I've seen it fighting for our children in child welfare, where our children have been commodified, they've been forgotten about. We see this happening now during this pandemic, where we have such a huge homelessness situation in our urban centers. We have an opioid crisis, and it seems that governments and people just do not care about our people. I want to be that strong voice that's going to ensure that I fight for our children and I fight for our most precious resource, our knowledge keepers, our women, and overall us as nations. My work in breaking down those barriers, and when I see the leadership in the time in the last month that I spent campaigning, you know, everybody's talking about this pandemic and how it's affected everybody. You know, first off, I want to state that I offer my prayers up to each and every family that's lost a loved one during this time. I want to lift up my hands to all the leadership across this country for keeping everyone safe and letting me know, when I was the co-chair of the COVID-19 task force, the needs-based funding, the resources and the investments we needed in our First Nations to keep our people protected. We argued at the time when the federal government did not even have a pandemic plan in place to protect our people. We argued and advocated for that. We argued for every resource and investment to keep our people safe. My work, working with chiefs from coast to coast to coast, has brought results to every First Nation. Whether we look at the investments in early learning and childcare, our most precious resource, our children, we've been able to manage to bring $3.5 billion to the table over the next 10 years. That's going to help our children both on reserve and in our urban centers. We know the struggles each and every day for us as parents when we're out there trying to find proper childcare, because, you know, we want to work and make a living. We always want to make sure that we secure a future for our women and our children. That's something that I want to ensure in my first mandate for you as your national chief, that in my first 100 days that I have an action plan that's ready, that's going to talk about everything that we're talking about right now. There's a lot of issues going forward when we look at those very bottom line benchmarks that chiefs are looking for right now. We're looking at the pandemic recovery, of course, as well as the reopening. We need much needed resources and investments. And that's what I'm hearing right now from chiefs. You know, how are we going to do that? And at the same time, they're looking for a leader and a national chief to provide some continuity, as well as to ensure that they're going to be there to fight right as day one when they're sworn in, that they're going to be there to help each and every First Nation in this country. I've been able, with the 12 portfolios I've held, in the most humble and honorable way on behalf of chiefs here across the country from coast to coast to coast, we have been able to accomplish much, chiefs. There's a lot that needs to be done. I want to continue to fight for our children. I want to continue to fight for those children found in those unmarked graves. I want to continue to fight and find justice for our survivors that are out there right now, and bring those people to ensure that we look after them and we take care of them, that they get all the necessary supports in place. And for myself, in my first 100 days of my action plan, we're going to look at those very things that affect us each and every day, whether it's from the issues that affect us when we look at our communities, such as the LGBTQIA2S. They're screaming out there to look for acknowledgement in that. I want you to all know I love you, I hear you, and I see you. I want to work with you, and I want to hear from you. To the leadership across the country that are looking for continuity and such, you know, I just want to say to you that it is with great humility that I've been approached by First Nations and, you know, consulted with our knowledge keepers and such, and our elders and my family and of close friends and such. You know, I formally announced my intention to be your national chief, and I think that I bring a wealth of experience because I've worked with the national chief, I've worked with regional chiefs across this country on some of the most critical issues that affect us as First Nations each and every day. I've been there to ensure that we fight for those necessary investments for safe shelters for our women.
when I heard from women leadership, when I held the women's portfolio, as well as looking at the families and that I met in such a most tragic circumstances, I met such loving, beautiful people that are looking for answers and looking for justice to find and bring their loved ones home. That's the same thing and the same fight that I want to do when we talk about C-92. The work that was created there in the co-drafting of C-92, as well as working with Marianne Ellen Turpel-Lafon. My hands up are going up to Cowessess First Nation, as well as Chief Cadmus Delorme, and them reaching that final day today to say, yes, we have laws that talk about the sovereignty and jurisdiction of our children, and that we're going to bring them home according to how our customs, protocols, and traditions are. You know, we look at the rights in the many jurisdictions that First Nations fully recognize and how they're respected and honored. You know, in working with the leadership across this country, as well as my knowledge, when we look at the governments and that, I want to make sure that we bring forward that, and that, you know, our sovereignty, our treaty rights are violated daily by governments while they continue to implement extinguishment policies and maneuvers through acts and legislation that continue to not show the best interests of our lands and our waters and resources. My approach with other governments is to be clear and unwavering, to support the advancement of inherent rights and treaty enforcement as we assert our sovereignty and jurisdictions. My work to you as your next national chief, I'll work as a strong First Nations advocate to ensure that your jurisdictions, your authorities, your treaties, and your Indigenous laws are respected each and every day. You know, I'm in turn determined that we drive these priorities as bottom line benchmarks. We need that. We have to continue to fight for each and every inch that we have nowadays. In all provincial and national forums, it will be a clear understanding that the path, priorities, and declarations of First Nation leaders and their people must be represented and understood from each and every level. That's my focus. You know, we've been talking, chiefs, across this country for many decades, and I want to acknowledge everyone that has laid that path, our past knowledge keepers and our leaders. You know, it's a time that we've always talked about getting to one day. Well, chiefs, I'm here now. I'm ready to walk with you now. Let's get started on day one. I look forward to the vote tomorrow, and I encourage you to vote for myself to be your next national chief, because I'll ensure to fight for our women. I'll ensure to fight for our children, and I'll ensure to make sure that your voices are heard at each and every table, and we'll make sure that we knock down those doors together. Thank you very much. Igosani Matakiape.
Thank you very much, Kevin Hart. The fifth speaker tonight will be Lee Crowchild. Lee, if you're online, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Actually, I didn't know if you had me on mute or not. Dr. Nastara, to all the Hakajes, Ogimas, Kupes, chiefs. My name is Lee Crowchild, and I'm running for national chief, and I'm asking for your vote. I was asked about this. You know, in the past, all this time campaign, we've been so used to doing 2-minute sound bites, and you try and get everything into 2 minutes. Now I'm doing 20 minutes. Like, holy, what am I going to talk about? But I do have a few things I want to say. I want to talk about the things that I believe. Because there are things I've come to believe, and these are what matter to me. My uncle, he's long past that, but he coined this phrase during those American Indian movement days. And he told me, he says, Lee, we have to have a native conscience re-strengthening. It's one thing to fight for our rights and that, but really we need to get back to what is our own consciousness. Don't care about what the other side says. And he was referring to the white people. Don't care about what they think of that. Us, as people of the land, we have to renew our own consciousness. We have to re-strengthen that. And that arose out of the American Indian movement days. Those of you are a little bit older than me would know that. Those of you who are younger, well, this is a bit of the history. So what matters to me? Jurisdiction, capable institutes of governance, culture, strategic thinking, and leadership. These all matter, and this is what brings me here to talk before you. I lay out everything under 4 principles. Environmental accountability. We know that that's a reality. We have to be accountable to our environment. We have to work towards economic parity. And we have to look at what's the cultural and social impact of all our actions. But at the core of all that is, what is our spiritual sustainability telling us? The matter of fact is, we're all at this precipice of real truth telling. I'm going to tell you about this ceremony that was taught to me by a Blackfoot elder, a man I respected very much. And he says, there's this ceremony that took place a long time ago. And he says, this is the English translation for it, and it's called making wolf. Why do you want to use the word making wolf? He said, when we think about it, you see a wolf there, and we all want to romanticize what it looks like, and we want to be one with the wolf and that, but we forget to understand that it's also a wild animal, and it can easily turn on us. So he says, I'm going to give you an example here. He says, long time ago, when 2 tribes went at war, and it could be anybody, it could be Blackfoots and Crees around here, that's what they are. That's what I know. It could be us Tsuut'ina and the Crees, we call anybody anyways. But the battle took place. Then after the breaking away, when the battle was over and people walked away to lick their wounds and gather their dead, one of the chiefs would call his tobacco runner forward. And he'd give his chief's pipe to that tobacco runner and his tobacco, and says, I need you to go over to that other camp, the chief's camp there, and offer this pipe and this tobacco. And say, because we're going to have a talk about this. We have to have a war lodge. That tobacco runner was like an emissary, really important role. So he would go there, and upon sight, he could be killed. Or he could be brought to the chief, present his tobacco, and says, my chief wants to have this war lodge. So that chief would decide if he takes it or not. If he takes it and he smokes it and says, yes, we're going to have a war lodge. So they go back. So they agree on the location. Both sides would come together. And as they come together and they sit in those circle with their spiritual leaders and the spiritual people, they would have their own ceremonies, their own pipes. They'd smoke their own pipes between themselves. Nobody would share anything at all. And after all those protocols were done, one side would get up and the narrative would begin. And that person would say, my war deed in this battle was, I killed 2 of you, there and there. The other side would get up and reciprocate that. And it could be somebody that says, yes, that is, you know who those were? That was my best friend there, and that was my uncle over there that you killed. Here's my war deed. And they would orate what their deeds were. So one by one, they would all get up and they would tell their truth, and this is where the making wolf part comes out. Because once everything has been said, they have 2 options. They say, well, we don't need to fight anymore. It's done. Or else you can call and say, okay, you buggers, you son of a bitches, let's go out and finish this battle. Well, those are your 2 outcomes. But what the reality was, is the truth was told, so both sides can say with true honesty that that's what that battle was. For us, Tsuut'ina, we did that with Powellmakers Reserve. Cut knife Saskatchewan, they call it. And that truth telling came actually not too long ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So we both know what the battle was. It was truth. So now let's bring this into modern day context. For us in the prairies, it was about signing of treaties. At the signing of treaties, government came back and says, well, we don't really want to fight. We don't want to kill each other. So we're asking you for this treaty, this treaty of peace. And so we said, okay, I think that's makes good sense. We don't want to kill. So we signed this treaty. We touched the pen and it became our signature. Right after a treaty was signed, the government says, oh, by the way, this is how we're going to govern you. It's called the Indian Act. And that's going to guarantee you the things that you need. I always use a horse as a metaphor. And in that metaphor, it says, it's our knowledge. Our knowledge is contained in that horse. So the government says, I'm going to hold this horse for you. So we sign that treaty. We get the Indian Act. And so what do they bring out? Is they bring out the smallpox blankets. Because their intention was never to honor the treaty, really. But they're going to wipe us out little by little. That didn't work. So they brought out the residential schools, and we all know the legacy of that. I don't need to go on that too much. And when that wasn't quite working the way they wanted it, they introduced the 60s scoop. A lot of my friends my age are recipients of that 60s scoop. And those of us that weren't fitting in any of those categories, what did they introduce? Busing. We're gonna bus your kids into the cities, the villages, the towns, so they can learn to be like us. You know, and so that's how it went. You know, I remember a long time ago, Indian Act says you can educate education up to grade 8. Well, everybody got to grade 8. So, well, we want them to have more education. And the government says, well, we can't give you any money. We can't do that because it's not in the Indian Act. So they have to be creative and thinking. It says, I got an idea. Rather than youth being 16, let's make youth up to 18. And then not long after that, let's make it up to 21. And finally, it's 29. This was told to me by a name leader who passed on now. And he says, you know what they did? They tricked us into calling everybody youth now. So you create this guardian and this ward relationship. So that's how we got funded to go to school, get our education, become those doctors and lawyers that we all talk about. You know, and as we became those educated, they says, well, you know, we kind of want to keep you humble. So we're going to create this millennial school. But we don't have to do it anymore because we've trained you how to do that. You know, and this talks to some of the bills that have been passed. You know, so this is where we are. And now they say, okay, and here's your horseback, by the way. And so the horse is standing there, and we're talking to it. But it's saying, I'm right here. I don't, you know, tell me what to do. I'm right here for you. And yet we lost the language of how to communicate it because we've adopted a whole different way of talking. So all of that part of that battle was based on ignorance and racism. Like it says, there's two sides to every battle. So on our side, when we signed a treaty, we agreed, no, we're not going to kill. Many of our warriors and our women, you know, they said, no, this is not working. I don't believe this. But I mean, we can't break the treaty. And if the government wants to be a war as a state, well, so be it. I'll make sure they're going to pay for that. So I'm going to use my body. It's the only weapon I got left. My body is, I'm going to use alcohol. I'm going to use drugs. And in a lot of instances, I'm going to sell my body for sex. This is my weapons to get back at them. What did that create? It created this idea of prejudice. So that's our story. You got racism, you got prejudice, two different concepts, but they have the same outcome. And now they're jumping to reconciliation. Everyone wants to jump to reconciliation. And I say, no, we gotta put that to the side for right now because we haven't even talked about the truth yet. So that's the ideas of making wolf. That ceremony had to be, of those wells have to be validated by both sides. So no lies could be told. It honors the fallen and the brave deeds that both sides did. So this is what we need to do now with Canada. Not just the governments, but all of Canada. We also need to look at our own involvement in this. Because right now, we're feeding the beast, the political system. That political system is lying to us. Because nowadays we know the predator and we see them feed on us. And we're aware that to starve the beast is our destiny. That's why we say these things. That's why we fight. You know, that side is kind to us. And they are polite, but they're never honest. We need to reclaim our own memory. And that is what unmarked graves are signaling to us. All these graves fund, there's this, reclaim the memory. Because, you know, the loss of being human is being replaced by our false prides. That's why the drugs and alcohol abuse prosper, because it's a false pride. It isn't enough to say I'm a traditionalist or that I can speak my language or it's about respect. We have to understand tradition, culture, the sharing of love. And that's the way it was a long time ago. I talked about economic accountability. I have to thank National Chief Perry Bellegarde. He put me on the Committee for Fiscal Relations, the Joint Fiscal Relations Net. And it was about the 10-year fiscal relation. Now, at that time, I brought some of my staff in at that time, and we always talked about treaty. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll take that in. So next meeting, it's taken out. We have to bring it back in again. And we thought, okay, I understand now, take it out. Next meeting is taken out. So this went on for 2 years. And in the end, they began to get, I said, okay, now we understand this, but they're in a conundrum because chiefs have asked me, well, should I accept this? And it puts me in a tough position. I say, well, you needed that money probably 20, 25 years ago. So the people have to eat. So you need to do what you do. I said, but there's a caveat in here. You can take this money, start to push for constitutional change, amendments to the Constitution. So we're not listed under Section 35. We're in fact determining what the future, how Canada is going to operate on our land. And I'll say it as it is, our stolen land. That's what I learned about fiscal relations. The government is not truthful about all of this. They say it's found money. No, it's money that's already in there. Privy Council's already determined that. So if we're fighting and slamming our fists and stomping our feet, they just have to sit on their hands and say, yeah, I hear you, but we're not going to do anything about it, but I hear you. Economic accountability has been a source of division where we should be seeking a shared vision that builds consensus on a path forward with better housing, jobs, water, education, and health. We achieve that by gathering our own data. We use the data from Stats Canada or Health Canada, and we know that those are not the right numbers. They say in your nation, well, maybe you're a nation of 2,000, but 75% of them are gone. So you're a nation of 500 people. You're going to fund for 500 people. Everybody else lives in a different area code. Let them worry about that. But we know in our kinship lines that that's not the truth. Our kinship lines go far and wide. So we're always constantly underfunded, and we're always demanding this because we don't have control over our own data. There's an acronym, OCAP, OCAP. That's ownership, control, access, and permission. So if we go down this road, and I would tell all you chiefs, now that they've given us money to do this, start gathering the information for yourself. There's they call them First Nations information governance centers. Make use of them so you're gathering your own data that you have control over, and you can give permission whenever you see fit. As national chief, I'm not going to say, no, I'm going to demand you that. No, this is your data because this is what sovereignty practices actually look like. So it means that every nation owns its own data and they share it as each nation sees fit. This helps in justifying the real funding to the nations. We've all been funded for a very long time. In that economic parity, we have the manpower, space, capabilities to be part of the economics of our own economic recovery. Equity, where our attention and intention goes, so does our energy flow. We have to build sustainable energy to meet the needs of our economic parity because that builds greater ownership and a sustained economic flow. We have to, on my nation, I introduced a business charter. So, and what that does is effectively separate politics from business. And it helped to breed First Nations ventures to success. We all know that we like to create these relationships and that. And, companies are taking a risk, if it's not clear that there's actual separation from business from politics. Because leadership always changes. But when you have a charter in place and you have your businesses, that stays intact. And you get a lot of people that are more interested in answering to that because they know they're secure. But it requires technology. I've listened today about everybody say, well, we don't have no access in the far north. Yes, that's true. There's technologies that are emerging that doesn't belong to big corporations like your TELUS or your Bell or your Rogers or any of those, because those are the big money eaters. They'll say, yeah, we'll help you. We'll give you help you a little bit, but we're gonna get the profits from that. In Alberta, on our casinos there, it's sort of an equity program. Whatever revenue we make, and reluctantly we have to give it to the province. That's just the way it goes. But what's distributed there is to all the nations across Alberta. They get a little portion of that revenue. So as we move forward in an economic flow, we may need to do that as well. Greater employment outcomes bring more training and capacity building, because we need to rebuild family systems and kinship lines to help to achieve the dreams of, and these are the dreams from the spirit world. We all talk about that. This is what they're telling us. This is what the found graves are telling us, because there needs to be a nationwide pathway to address the broken chain of fatherhood. We all know that story. We need to respect our women leaders and our chiefs, because they are our backbone. We can't move forward anymore if we don't have a balanced approach in chieftainship. National chief, as me, I would rely on the words of our women leaders, our women chiefs. I've worked a lot with the Muslim community here in Calgary, because they come from oppression. They know what it feels like, and they ask questions. Well, what do I need? How can we help, or what can be part of this? I work for the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good, and that's made up of all the church groups in Calgary. I don't go to church myself. I'm kind of a practice our traditional ways, but I know in that practice we're talking about how we build the bridges with other people. Because it's a spiritual sustainability. Because living our truth is what we were meant to be. Because it always has been our compass point. Relatives of our past are there to help. Reclaiming our memory, because civilization has tried to erase it. I've only got 2 minutes left here. So my vision for AFN. There is a need for a big reset. AFN has to become relevant to the voices of chiefs across Canada. And I've said that all along. We have used non-native definitions and perspectives of defining our own sovereignty, because we were impacted by Section 35, and others because it is based on racism and ignorance. I'm going to ask the chiefs, all of you out here, to help me to head up the needs of our nation and to use our own methodologies, because our own First Nation laws are the deepest expressions of our culture and our values. I'm not the smartest person here, but all of you chiefs collectively, you are. And I'm going to ask you to all join me in doing this. We have to embrace the technology. And today was a good example of that. In the past 18 months, the use of Zoom, we've all become a little bit used to it. We have to stop shaming the settler state, because they don't care. They can do whatever they're doing. The despair is deep, and we know that. And it comes out as self-harm and lashing out. Our own families do that. So that's about making both. There needs to be a native conscience re-strengthening, and it rose out of the AIM days, but it was with us all along. Jurisdiction, capable institution, governance net. Now is the time for real chieftainship to rise up. And we, AFN, will support that. I will call on all chiefs to assist me, and I will in turn stand beside you all the way, always under your authority. So I thank you for listening to me, and I ask that you vote for me tomorrow. See us, Gus. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee Crowchild. At this point, we'll move to our 6th speaker, which will be Roseanne Archibald, who will be introduced by Chief Lance Haymond and Chief Emily Wheaton.
Good evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the drum and the songs from this morning and the opening prayer by Elder Gary Salt. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Kwe, hello, bonjour. My name is Lance Haymond. I am the chief of the Algonquin community of Quebec, a small community in Quebec on the Quebec-Ontario frontier. Well, this year's group of candidates is a stellar group who brings many strengths, diverse backgrounds, and genuine interest to make AFN better. There's one candidate who, in my opinion, stands out amongst all of these candidates. And that candidate is Roseanne Archibald, whose most recent role has been Regional Chief for Ontario Region. 3 years ago, she was elected Regional Chief, and was assigned a number of portfolios as part of her responsibilities on the AFN executive. I met Roseanne when she was assigned to the Chiefs Committee on Housing, Water, Infrastructure, and Emergency Measures. She was assigned as the co-chair of the water portfolio and quickly became a strong advocate on this file, given the fact that there were and still are many communities without access to safe drinking water across this country. And that's deplorable. Water is a human right. And it's 2021 and we're still talking about communities that don't have water. Roseanne also supported the work the Chiefs Committee was doing on housing. Again, recognizing that housing is a critical need in our communities and that many communities, nations, and regions are in a housing crisis. And that with this global pandemic, it only made things worse. Roseanne continues to be a strong voice, and as National Chief, she will continue to work and support the Chiefs Committees on these important files. I am supporting Roseanne in her bid for National Chief of the AFN because I think she is the most qualified. Of all the candidates, she is the most seasoned and experienced, having been a chief at every level, from being a community chief all the way to becoming Ontario Regional Chief. And now it's time for her to make the leap and the transition from a strong regional chief to our national chief. I admire the way Roseanne conducts herself, and because she is grounded in our traditional teachings and ceremony, she has a deep respect for all people. This is important because this is part of her core as a person, a woman, and a human being. This is who she is. She doesn't have to fake it. She is the real deal. She is a great role model for all the people who have historically felt displaced or like they didn't have a voice. It's time for our chiefs to tell women, girls, and to LGBTQIA people that you can dream, and that dream, you can become a chief, a regional chief, and even a national chief. While everything I've said is important as to why I support Roseanne, what made me a fan, an ardent supporter, and one of her nominators, and why I'm speaking to you today, happened at the Special Chiefs Assembly in December. There was a resolution, number 13. It was a resolution to end gender discrimination within the AFN. It was clear that this resolution made many uncomfortable, and it appeared that there were some backroom games being played and that someone didn't want this resolution adopted. And while we saw what was happening, not one chief spoke up, not a community chief, not a grand chief, a regional chief, and that included myself. I simply, was going to let the process be the process. And, it looked like this resolution, was probably destined to fail. But Roseanne spoke up. She spoke up because what she was seeing happening, was wrong. She called out those who were speaking against the resolution. In fact, she went further and called out the national chief to speak to and support this important resolution. The motion was adopted. There were consequences for her outspokenness and for challenging the establishment of the AFN. Roseanne showed that in calling people out, that she has principles and morals. Her voice made a difference, and that's the voice we need advocating and making the changes needed to make our assemblies and the AFN a safe and welcoming environment for everyone, especially those who are already marginalized by our people and society. I want to just take a minute and go away from my prepared text because, these marginalized people, these two-spirit, these LGBTQIA people, they're our family, our friends, they're our children, they're brothers and sisters, they're our aunties and uncles. And, we need, as chiefs, to create that space. And I believe Roseanne is the person as national chief to create that space. Last week, she took the time and made the trip to join with thousands of us in Ottawa who marched in memory of the children who didn't make it home for residential school. She's the kind of chief that will be there. If you call her, she will answer and she will be there for you. À mes collègues chefs de Québec, Roseanne est le gendre de leader dont nous avons besoin en tant que chef national et c'est pourquoi je l'appuie. Si vous voulez de la force, de la stabilité et un changement progressif, alors joignez-nous à moi et votez pour Roseanne demain et faites-elle la première femme chef national de l'Assemblée des Premières Nations. Roseanne Archibald is the kind of leader that we need as national chief, and that is why I am supporting her. If you want strength, stability, and progressive change, then join me and vote for Roseanne tomorrow and make her our first woman national chief. Miigwech, merci, thank you.
Ani Gijab Dishnakaz, Ashkigaman Gimandao. I'd like to acknowledge those who ensured that our meeting opened in a good way. Miigwech. I had the pleasure of meeting Roseanne 2 years ago at my first AFN AGA. When I introduced myself, Roseanne was attentive and welcoming. I instantly felt this anti-energy from Roseanne, a strong woman who would be supportive and firm in her advocacy for our communities. At that time, I had no idea that my term as chief would be dominated by a pandemic. I'm sure Roseanne didn't anticipate this pandemic either. When the pandemic reached my community with our first case in the summer of 2020, Roseanne texted me every day until the cases were resolved. She ensured that we had the supports we needed as we moved through this difficult period and ensured regular updates and contact throughout the pandemic thereafter. I'm here today to support Roseanne because her ability to build relationships with everyone is admirable. As most of you are aware, dealing with a conservative government can be an uphill battle for Indigenous communities or leaders. Roseanne has made dealing with the provincial Conservatives look like an easy relationship. There have been difficult conversations. There have been tense moments. But through it all, Roseanne has been respectful and ensured that the First Nation and provincial relationship can move forward without letting our voices be ignored. A prime example of how effective Roseanne has been was her appointment to the Provincial Vaccination Task Force. In fact, Roseanne was the only First Nations leader in Canada appointed to a provincial task force. In this role, Roseanne ensured that the particular concerns of both urban and on-reserve Indigenous voices were heard. Roseanne also made sure that our communities and leadership had access to information regarding the vaccines at the earliest opportunity so that we can make informed decisions based on science and in the best interest of our communities. I have seen Roseanne navigate through conversations about holding the province and Canada accountable for past actions while ensuring a respectful tone. Roseanne is not a woman who puts up with being ignored or silenced. I have seen Roseanne do this in accordance with our teachings about balance. I have watched Roseanne articulate the concerns of our communities in intelligent ways. I've seen her be strategic in her approach to addressing major concerns, using all tools at her disposal to make sure we get where we need to be. I've seen her hold her head high and behave appropriately during unfounded attacks. As I've said, Roseanne will be the national chief we need at these difficult times. She's like the auntie who will keep us on the right path and who will make sure that we are heard. She is the strong voice who will help us achieve change and build the relationships toward discovering truth and charting a path toward true reconciliation. We see before us a collective movement in Canada to move in a better direction, and Roseanne will carry this relationship for all of us. I hope you take time tomorrow on July 7th to lend your support to a woman who can lead us to building stronger relationships with our national partners. I hope you can stand with Roseanne, who can ensure our collective voice is heard. Miigwech.
Roseanne, if you're in the room, please feel free. Just to note that we haven't seen Roseanne in the room we've been trying to contact, so we'll give Roseanne another minute to see whether she is here. I see Roseanne in the waiting room now, so I think we'll just wait 1 minute for her to be let in. I believe Roseanne is with us now. So Roseanne, if you're with us, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mute. I'm not sure how to mute.
You'll have to turn off the sound on one of the devices.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was in the room for the main meeting. I didn't realize I had to register for the candidates forum. In any case, Wachimas way Okumakanik, Okumakana Shishik, Shehak, Skoyak, Nesta, Oshkaniwak, Roseanne Archibald, Nitishakasan, Dakutagmo, Sakata Koachian. Thank you very much, Chief Heyman and Chief Witang, for that beautiful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the creator, the world around us, and our place within it. I'm coming to you from my own home territory of Dakotagmo Nation and acknowledge you on your ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories where you are today. I want to say also miigwech to all of my 15 nominators nationally, Ginanasmukten to our outgoing national chief and the AFN executive for everything you have done over the last 3 years, and especially for the great work that we have done together. Miigwech for our beautiful opening ceremonies and prayers. Chiefs and leaders, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a proud Inanuasquea. I am an auntie, as Chief Witang said. I'm a great auntie. I'm a godmother to 6, 3 boys and 3 girls, and I'm a sister and a friend to many. Before I announced my intention to run for national chief, I went into ceremony and searched my heart and spirit, and I felt that I had to have a spiritual calling for this work. And after prayer and meditation, I realized it was important for me to continue my leadership role nationally. This is an election that almost did not go ahead due to the compounding crises that we find ourselves in: a global pandemic, wildfires, and other natural disasters, which are the result of climate change, and our little ones also being recovered from our former residential schools. It's an emotional time, but if I've learned anything over my life, it's that from difficulties emerge healing, strength, and opportunities. Now, more than ever, we need a stable and strong leader who is committed to evolutionary change. I am that person. In fact, Ontario Chiefs have told me that I have come to represent stability, comfort, and decisiveness as a result of my leadership during the global pandemic. In times of chaos, I've been known to be calm at the center of a storm, something I have learned from my mom. I also know that in a time of darkness, we need a guiding light of hope. And this is what I have tried to embody throughout my leadership journey, to be a beacon emitting positive energy, grounded and connected to all of creation, channeling a deep and abiding love and care for everyone. My greatest hope is that I am a good instrument for the Great Spirit by embodying the spiritual principles of leadership that are grounded in our 7 sacred teachings, of which the highest for me is love. And I humbly speak to you today as a result of a long history of leadership and activism that is firmly grounded in spirit. I'm sorry that I could not connect personally to all of you during the campaign, and I make this commitment that when elected as national chief, I will visit you in your community once the pandemic ends. Right now, we can see the tables are turning, where Canadians are finally starting to learn what their governments have done to our people and our families, and we are gathering more allies. And with the support of our allies, we can make substantive changes for our communities. We must seize this moment and take a quantum leap of change. So tomorrow, you will decide which one of us has the political ability, the skills, the strength to bring unity, respect, and still push hard for change and progress. Which one of us can show that things will be different, that things will be better. I am asking you to stand with me and support me by voting for me as the next national chief. As we know, leadership is not easy. And I just want you to know that it is a sacred calling for me, and it is filled with challenges and criticisms. And you need a national chief who is not going to sway under pressure, someone who will remain steady and consistent. You need someone who will answer your call, stand with you, advocate for you at all levels where you need it. And yes, I am that person. I wanted to tell you that I did have a platform document, and I do hope that you had an opportunity to read it. It's called Setting a Strategic Direction Toward Evolutionary and Positive Change, where I outline my vision, my leadership values, and my 7 priority goals. If we missed you during our email process, you can find it on my website, roseannearchibald.ca. My positive vision for the future encompasses a healthy Assembly of First Nations organization that strengthens First Nation communities. Further, First Nation sovereignty, jurisdiction, and inherent in treaty rights are recognized, honored, implemented by the Crown based upon natural and spiritual laws. You can go through my document, and I just want to highlight a couple of areas. One is we need post-pandemic recovery plans. We need to strengthen our connections and relationships. We need to fully engage women, youth, and two-spirited LGBTQIA people through empowerment, capacity building, and leadership development. As well as we move forward, there must be truth before reconciliation. I will support and advocate for resources for ongoing healing from intergenerational trauma from colonization, particularly residential schools. As national chief, I will work with federal partners to make sure that all 94 TRC calls to action are implemented. It is crucial that we have a strategic approach that is outlined in my document. And through strategies, I was able to work collaboratively in Ontario to make a difference. So I want to assure you that I'm holding a positive vision of happy, healthy children who are surrounded by the love and care of their families, living in safe, vibrant communities that are grounded in well-being, culture, and language. In conclusion, Chiefs, you will make history tomorrow. And when you elect me, I will be the representative of the historic change that you are enacting. So send a clear message to the women that you love. Show them that they matter. Show them that they can see themselves at the AFN represented by a loving, kind, and strong female national chief. Ninanaskamun Gisakitin. Ninanaskamun Gisakitin. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roseanne Archibald. Our final speaker tonight will be Alvin Fiddler, who will be introduced by Ogima Duke-Peltier. Please go ahead.
Well, good evening, chiefs, delegates, and candidates. Miigwech Dinin, Din Mikkel Nam Kanawia. I'm Gima Duke Peltier from Wequampong Territory, and I'm proud to be here to introduce and to nominate Alvin Fiddler for the national chief position. I do want to say that I've had a personal relationship with Alvin for many, many years. I believe that, I think that one of the most important things that really compelled me to be attracted to his work is when he became a deputy grand chief at the Anishinaabe Nation in 2012. I was also elected chief here in Wequampong at the same time. And when I walked into the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society Human Rights Tribunal hearings, he was the only leader that was sitting there beside me at the time. And it wasn't until a few years later before it attracted the attention of the rest of the leadership across the country. And it's from that perspective that myself, I knew that he was a leader that truly cared about the children and our future and our families. And from that perspective, I know that he listens, he comprehends, and he's a man of action. Throughout his career, he's had a wide array and a diverse career where he's worked in the health sector. He's been a health director. He's been a family treatment center manager. He's also been appointed on many occasions to some of the very toughest files that came across in Ontario. And when he took on some roles with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Ontario Regional Liaison. And also through much of the justice initiatives that have taken place, where whether it was inquests for deaths of children in Thunder Bay or the Ipperwash Inquiry. These are areas that Alvin has worked diligently on. In regards to some of the areas that require the attention at a national level, he's been at the forefront of policing reform in Ontario, where we are trying to make policing an essential service through his type of work. And in saying all that, his platform and his vision that he's bringing forward is centered around the core objectives that I believe in wholeheartedly, that it has to be about our children, it has to be about the land and the water, and about our communities. And from his work throughout his political career, he's demonstrated time and time again that those are his focuses. And he's been able to deliver on time, on many occasions for the people that he represents. And it's from that perspective that I'm coming through here and endorsing Alvin as the national chief candidate.
Alvin, go ahead.
Miigwech, Ogama Pelche. Miigwech, Kidden. I got the Wyndham Shin with the Wajim Baton Max Makan, my work zone. Miigwech, Kidden now Ogamacanik. I want to start by acknowledging the prayers, the songs from this morning to the elders and the knowledge keepers that opened this meeting for us this morning. Now, I acknowledge all of you, chiefs. I know it's been a long day, and I thank you for staying to hear us this afternoon, this evening. And so I acknowledge your leadership. I acknowledge your territories, your citizens. I also want to acknowledge all our veterans and all our Indian residential school survivors. Miigwech and tickets. Mina nakmak mando wesek waja Minaguk when I'm speaking to you this evening from Thunder Bay in the beautiful Robinson Superior Treaty Territory. And so I always acknowledge Chief Peter Collins and the beautiful people of Fort William First Nation for allowing us to be here. I also want to acknowledge the challenging times that we find ourselves in right now. Not only with this global pandemic, but also the recent discovery of our children and two Kamloops, Sekwetchimik and Coasis First Nation, and other former sites of Indian residential schools right across the country, right across our territories. And I just want to say this, that thoughts and prayers are no longer enough. This requires urgent and thoughtful action. Kazian, Alvin Fiddler. My name is Alvin Fiddler from Musqueam First Nation in the Treaty 9 territory. It's a small community of 200 people on the beautiful shores of the Severn River. And I always talk about my parents because I would not be here without my mom and my dad. And I feel very fortunate that I was raised by two wonderful parents. My mother, Eunice, who is now in her mid-80s, is at an elders facility in Solikot for the last 4 years. And she was a healer. And she often tells me about the babies that she helped deliver while she was living up in Bearskin Lake and in Muskrat Dam. And my dad, Moses, who passed away 7 years ago. And my dad was a hunter, a gatherer, fisherman, a gardener, taught me how to garden. And as a young boy, my dad witnessed the signing of the APTN Treaty Number 9 up in Victor Lake. And he would often talk to us about what the treaty meant to him and the other elders that were there, and then passing on those teachings to us, that they never surrendered their land. Not one tree, not one rock, not one lake. They never talked about surrendering anything. And that's what he wanted me to make sure that I knew growing up in the work that I do today, that we have ownership of our land, our water, and everything that's in it. And also the sacred responsibility that comes with it to look after our land. And he talked about the treaty and what it means and what it meant to them, that it means, first of all, peaceful coexistence, mutual benefits. And if all the parties follow the terms and conditions of the treaty, it will mean prosperity for everyone. And so those are my parents. I'm incredibly lucky as well that I have a wonderful family. My wife, Tisa, I'm sure she's listening from our home. She's one of the most passionate educators that I know. And she's also been my barber over the last year and a half. And I thank her for her love, for her abiding love and support to my family over the last, we got married in 1997. And I just honor her and thank her for the work that she does. We are blessed with two wonderful children. Allison is 16 years old, and Ali just got her beginner's license recently. And so she takes me for rides, and I'm your typical nervous dad, you know, whenever she goes driving, because I want to make sure that she follows all the rules of the road. And she is becoming just a beautiful young woman, and I acknowledge her. Jace is 21, and Jace lives with complex needs. And so I get it, you know, when we talk about the needs of our children, that no matter what they may be up against, that they deserve to have access to the supports that they need to live a quality of life and to be healthy and happy. And my platform, which leads me to why I'm running, you know, my platform is based on my life's teachings and life's work. And for me, it starts with our children. Les enfants. We are still reeling from the recent revelations of those little ones who never made it home from Indian residential schools across the country. And I am committed to supporting the sacred work that needs to happen of finding, identifying, and bringing them home. And also to follow the evidence wherever it leads to make sure that the institutions that are responsible for this genocide, for this injustice, are held accountable. But even like today, even as we seek justice for these children who never came home, we must also fight for them, making sure that they have access to the services they need and deserve where and when they need it. And those of you that have known me and watched me work, and I thank Chief Pelche for mentioning the first time we met. It was at the Human Rights Tribunal building in Ottawa, fighting for our children, that I will never grow tired of fighting for the rights of our children. The second point of my platform, Our Land, La Terre. Within, just looking at the news in the last few days, with the recent heat waves, drought, forest fires, and an ocean on fire, we have reached a critical point with our planet. And I also just want to acknowledge our relatives in BC who are right now displaced, some of them, because of the forest fires, the threat of the forest fires to their homes and their communities. And we will make sure that there are supports for them in the days ahead. But we also know that from our own teachings, that in order for Mother Earth to sustain us into the future, we also need to care for her and to look after her. And we know that our people have always had ways of caring for the land, our waters, our fish, our trees. And we have to get back to these ways to bring balance and healing. Community, like commodity. As I've gathered with you chiefs over these last 4 weeks, through Zoom meetings and phone calls, I have heard over and over, not just from the leadership, but from community members right across the country, about the systemic racism that continues to harm our people and sometimes even causing death, whether it's policing or the hospitals or even in the schools. We know that the institutions that claim to provide care are failing us. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done here at the Anishinaabe Nation to address some of these important issues. That as Grand Chief over the last 6 years, we have taken steps to address the inequities on education through the 7 Youth Inquest that was held 5 years ago. And I always honor those students that died here in Thunder Bay, that to make sure that their death was not in vain, that they are not forgotten. And that through the work that we've done, we've supported students that come to Thunder Bay and other urban centers. Many of them still have to leave, as I did when I was 14 years old, to go to high school. And we need to make sure that you have the supports to create that pathway of success for them. Community safety is also another important priority that I've heard from you chiefs over the last 5 weeks or 6 weeks. And that's something we've done to APTN, especially during this pandemic. We have worked towards creating legislation where the Anishinaabe Police Service and other First Nation police services in the province of Ontario, those that want to, can finally get designation, that they can finally be deemed an essential service with adequacy standards. And so that they can finally meet the mandate that they were given when they were created, in our case at NAN or NAPS, almost 30 years ago. The future, love and ear. As we move past this global pandemic, we need a recovery plan for all our nations to make sure that all of us come through this, not just surviving, but thriving. In order for us to effectively develop and implement this roadmap, we need a renewed mandate for the AFN, our national organization. And that begins with listening to the distinct and diverse needs of our nations. We know that the challenges we are facing today are enormous, whether it's making sure that our communities have access to clean, safe drinking water, adequate housing, adequate healthcare, public health, mental health, education. The list goes on and on. But as I think about and reflect on these challenges that we're facing, the situation could not be more urgent. We need an assembly that can rise to these challenges, one that is purpose-built, responsive, transformed. The AFN does not exist to make things easy for government, to create consensus where none exists, or to be a one-stop shop for government to cross off duty to consult off the bureaucratic checklist. But in spite of all this, chiefs and citizens, in spite of all the enormous challenges facing our people, I remain fundamentally hopeful for what we can do together. I am ready to work. My family is ready. My team is ready. And my door will always be open. And we will serve you with humility. We will serve you with respect. And we will serve you with fire. And tonight, chiefs, I, with great humility, ask for your support, for your vote tomorrow. And together, I know we will do great things for our children and for our communities. Kaya ask committed, Masi Cho, Walanan, Hi, Miigwech. Thank you so much, Masi Cho. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Alvin Fiddler. And may I actually say thank you to all of the candidates for your impassioned statements and frankly for keeping to the time. That is quite impressive by everybody. At this point, we have the question and answers period. I'm aware that we're now at 8:30. We were supposed to finish at 9. I will take us a little bit later than 9 and possibly finish us at 9:30. So I will now open the floor for questions and answers. Please raise your hand on the Zoom platform. If you're joining us by phone, you must press *9. Please recall that only chiefs and proxies may pose questions at this time. Questions may be up to 2 minutes in length, but feel free to be concise and use less than 2 minutes. You'll be signaled. In fact, I will just cut you off at 2 minutes on your questions. Candidates have 3 minutes on their answers. And I see one question already from Chief Don Miracle. I will open the floor to Chief Don Miracle for a question.
Carolyn Bennett announced at the United Nations that the right to safe drinking water is a human right. I would like to ask the candidates, what is their understanding of which of the regions has the greatest need? Well, they will do about it. Which has the greatest need in terms of the backlog of housing and what their plan is to address it, both those two basic needs.
I will ask Dr. Kathy Martin perhaps to start. If Kathy, you're interested in answering that question. You have 3 minutes. Yes, thank you. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Got it.
You got it? Okay. Thank you, Chief Miracle, for that question. So you're asking what we would do about prioritizing rights to clean water and to housing, if I heard you correctly? Okay, I believe that was the question. So definitely, so we have to prioritize our human rights. And as I was talking about in my speech, we talked about systemic racism, and oftentimes we target that from the ground up. We start talking about you know, the systems, and it needs to be done. We need to, of course, channel funds to ensure that there's clean water and adequate housing, but we also need to look at the systems that are in place that prevent that. And again, we're looking at human rights issues, not just First Nation issues, but it is a human rights. And again, our relationship with Canada has always been a legal one. And I think Canada responds mainly to class action suits, if you will. You know, we have to work with them so that they can provide this. They've released some money for Clean Water Initiative. It's inadequate. How do we determine who's priority with that? It's hard to say. I don't have all the facts in front of me, but it's something that the chiefs have to sit down and decide what to do and what plan of action to do to ensure that it's not just a Band-Aid approach to clean water and housing, and that the needs are really being addressed. With rights to housing, there have been some initiatives, and I'm thankful that the government has addressed these initiatives, like with rapid housing initiative and putting funding dollars there. But again, it's inadequate. So we need to look at our rights as humans, our rights as Indigenous to this land, and we need to address it from there and work with what we have in place, what exists now in place, do an analysis of that, and meet with the chiefs and move forward on how to prioritize how we're going to achieve this objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kathy Martin. I will move to Kevin T. Hart. If you would like to respond, feel free. And just to be clear, I'm going to move through the order of candidates as we had at this point for this first round. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. It's always been an important question. For myself, when I took over the portfolio of housing, water, infrastructure, and emergency services, for example, Manitoba statistically was the worst region in this country. When I asked the national chief to have the endeavor of having this portfolio where we had no resources whatsoever, my fellow co-chair, Chief Lance Heyman, can attest to that. Chiefs at the time indicated their frustration with government because of the last decade of the Conservative government with little to no investments in our First Nations. When we look at the water needs right now, it's abundantly clear the Ontario region is by far the worst region when in terms of needs for safe drinking water, and to remove these DWAs and such. The work that for myself as the national portfolio holder, working with chiefs across the country, including chiefs such as Chief Don Miracle, who sat on that Chiefs Committee from Ontario, he can attest that I have advocated time and time again to ensure that each and every region receives the maximum investments and needs. Has it been a fair process? Not at all. I know that, for example, when we look at funding formulas and that, the concerns from our relatives from BC have always been voiced at those national tables. Our friends from the North, when we talk about the North of 60 modern day treaties, the territorial governments right now get the direct funding when it comes for housing, water, and infrastructure needs there. These legislation and laws and policies are clearly keeping our people in third world conditions. We have worked and brought those voices forward at the federal tables. We have been able in this last federal budget and subsequent budgets to bring billions of dollars now forward. And that has taken effort of hearing from the voices you chiefs each and every day as your national portfolio holder, telling me how we need to take care of our people. We've seen it during this pandemic, 15, 20 people in a 3-bedroom home. And how do we keep our people safe when everybody's infected? I've seen it when we look at the infrastructure needs in this country. When it comes to drinking water, we've always asked for the repeal of the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act. That's the fight that I will continue as your national chief to ensure those battles are won, and I'll provide those necessary investments and resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Hart. I'll pass the floor to Lee Crowchild, if you would like to speak to this question.
Okay, okay, I've been unmuted. So, you know, the question is about water. I've heard people talk about human rights. Well, that's really arrogant because that's steeped in Christian value. We talk about human rights. We talk about civil rights. Well, it's really ignorant because it doesn't account for us. What we need to do is talk about what is our natural rights, because everything has a right to exist. So in moving forward here with housing and water, I would say that we need to, and I would put a task force together and say, let's create our own housing strategies, meaning our own guidelines for housing, because the people of every community in every area, they know how to live with the land. But we get thrown this CMHC building standard, so we know that that's not adequate. You know, and I had a talk with a chief, and he says, well, I'm going to get 9 homes for my community. This is up in the Northwest Territories. The needs are many, so I probably got to cut that in half. So I get 18 homes that are going to be even more substandard. You know, so we're caught in this constant cycle, and that's why it says our access to our own data is so important. And I think the same goes for water, for safe drinking water. There are processes already exist that we can clean up water, that we don't need to keep pounding our fist in that, because when Indian Affairs gives us money, who makes all the money? All chiefs have an engineer in their pocket. That engineer is making all the money, that engineering firm. And it's hit and miss. Some engineering firms are good, we'll swear by them and that. You know, others aren't so much. I would ask this question, on those engineering firms, are you sitting on that board of directors, guiding what that should look like? In most cases, no. We're at the whim of what government says, what engineering firms are, because they want to make money. We're big business. First Nations are big business, make no mistake about it. But we need to come up with these plans ourselves. What is our safe drinking water strategy that goes beyond what the Canada standards are, and developing our own housing strategies, our own guidelines. And that looks at sustainable resources. That looks at alternative methodologies. It's all set there. All the things we need to do is right there for us. And it's just up to you as chiefs to rely on your communities, to give you the faith, say, go ahead, you can do it. Because I believe that you can do it. Enacting more policy is just enacting more policy in a system that don't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee Crowchild. I will ask if Roseanne Archibald would like to speak to this question. Go ahead.
I was trying to unmute myself. I am having a few technical difficulties. Thank you, Chief Miracle, for this question. This is actually a process that I started in Ontario. I was finishing my term as regional chief. Ontario does have the highest amount of boil water advisories nationally. And what we started to do in the Ontario region, and I'm certainly hopeful that the new regional chief, Glenn Hare, will continue this good work, is to have a process with Indigenous Services Canada on identifying what are the reasons that we have these boil water advisories. Sorry, I'm trying to see the clock. Sorry, I want to keep track of the in here. Oh, there we go. So what are these obstacles that we have, and why does Ontario have the highest boil water advisories in Canada? And so that process has started. It is a partnership process between Indigenous Services Canada and the Chiefs of Ontario Secretariat. And so that work I will support as the national chief. It's really important that regions are empowered to find the solutions that make sense to them. And this is what I have noticed nationally, is sometimes people want to try and create a response nationally that doesn't fit every region. And so I really look forward to working with Grand Council Chief, or sorry, Regional Chief Hare, and having that work result in the elimination of all boil water advisories in Ontario. That is my goal as a national chief. It was my goal as the Ontario regional chief, and I will make sure that I do everything in my power to make that happen. In relation to housing, this is a portfolio I did share with Regional Chief Hart, and I do believe that we have to, again, continue to focus on social housing for First Nations. Often we are put into these programs that are, you know, market housing and those kinds of things, which I think are helpful. But at the end of the day, we need the government to commit to social housing programs for First Nations. And that is actually what I will do. I'll continue to advocate that. For that, and make sure that we do have a strong social housing program for First Nations to deal with the houselessness and homelessness and the overcrowding in our First Nations. I will work on that diligently. It's a priority for all of us, and you can count on me, Chief Miracle, to work with you. Miigwech.
Thank you, Roseanne Archibald. I will pass the floor to Alvin Fiddler if you would like to speak to this question.
Miigwech, Chief Miracle, for your question. I hope you're doing well in your community. These are very important and very pressing issues that you raised. And when I just want to share briefly with you my own experience when I became a Grand Chief 6 years ago. Even though this is talked about at every Chiefs meeting, the housing crisis, the need for access to clean, safe drinking water. When I walked into the office, there was no plan to deal with the housing crisis. And also there was no capacity. We didn't have an infrastructure unit at NAN to address these very pressing issues. And we had to quickly build that capacity in my office. With our own infrastructure unit, we bought a housing director, a water specialist, transportation specialist, one that will help improve infrastructure in our communities. And we also got to work to developing a plan on housing in partnership with Ryerson, Together Design Lab and others to help us, first of all, map out and actually figure out what that housing crisis looks like, first of all, and to develop a plan and solutions. And we have that now. And also on water. When I became Grand Chief, we had 33 BWAs. We're down to 13, and that's still 13 too many. And one of those is my own community of Muskrat Dam. But we have a plan to begin to lift those boil water advisories, including in the Scanaga. You probably know about their experience there, that they're the longest boil water advisory on that list in the country, almost 30 years. And they should not, in communities others that have looked at or pursuing legal action, they should not have to pursue legal action. That water, access to clean, safe drinking water, especially during this global pandemic, is a fundamental human right. And that everyone, every child, every family deserves to have access to clean, safe drinking water. That is something I will make a priority when I am National Chief, to make sure that no child or no family that they need clean, safe drinking water now. And I'll make sure there's capacity at the National Chief's Office to address these very critical issues. So I thank you, Chief Miracle, for your question. I look forward to working with you in the days and weeks and months ahead. Thank you guys for your question.
Thank you, Alvin Fiddler. I'll turn the floor to Jody Calahoo Stonehouse if you'd like to speak to this question.
Thank you, Chief Miracle, for this question. First and foremost, what we need to do is a resolution review. We also need a clear assessment through research and data to present back to the chiefs and assembly on what the need looks like. What's really important is that the criteria around need also takes into consideration our remote communities, particularly around the issue of water, as transporting water to our northern communities compounds the cost and the financial drain on those communities. Insofar as the 51 boil water advisories, we also need to take a look and an assessment view around where the need is and how we can implement immediately, quickly into as many communities as possible. The Canadian state shouldn't determine where our resources go. This needs to be done through us, through data-based decisions that will make impact, and so that we determine the results so that they are measurable and we can continue to build on our successes. Hey.
Thank you, Jody Calahoo Stonehouse. And I will move to Reginald Bellerose if you would like to speak to this question.
The chief for the question. I believe that housing is a national priority with a national demand. So many nations right across the country with a long list of people waiting for homes. In this housing crisis that we're in, there's such a large gap in infrastructure. So you can solve one problem, create a home, build a home, but then you put strain on your water treatment capacity, and then you put strain on on your sewage and wastewater. So this needs to be an important focus is on the infrastructure. And when you look at the adjustments that's needed for northern nations, it cannot be the same amount of funding as for the rest of Canada. Another thing on water I feel that's very important is we need to modernize the federal system. And by modernizing that, the lowest bid process needs to stop because we are not getting the quality that we need when you take the lowest bid. The lowest bid will always give you the poorest quality. And then as you get into operations, you get the breakdowns, you get the failures. Another area I want to focus on both housing and water is regulations for the water treatment, the plant operators. Right now, we're using provincial regulations here in Saskatchewan, but it's a federally funded program. And we need to actually develop our own guidelines by which the water treatment plant operators will follow. Another area that's important to note with water is the chief and council still hold the liability over safe drinking water, clean drinking water. Health Canada will not accept that liability. And it's a great risk right now because the elected leadership needs to be aware, as we were. We asked them, you accept liability, that goes to you. So if there's a death from poor drinking water, poor quality, that falls onto leadership. So that's one area that we all need to get together to push back on that and say, it's your plant, it's your funding, you funded it, you accept liability. Thank you.
Thank you, Reginald Bellerose. I will take a question now. I'm just going to note that we have two questions, and I think that's probably all we'll have time for, but we'll see. One from Chief King and one from Chief Harris. And the first candidate to answer the question on this round will be Roseanne Archibald. I'll pass the floor to Chief King to ask a question. 2 minutes, please.
Hello.
Go ahead.
This question is actually only for Roseanne and two candidates. So Elvin would be the other candidate I'd like to ask the question to, if it's okay with the rest of the candidates.
That's fine. I'll still open the floor to them if they so choose, but I get you want to direct it there. Go ahead.
Question is that our community, Gull Bay First Nation, has an unprecedented $71 million worth of development that's taken place right now without the help of the AFN Chiefs of Ontario. And this has been done solely with the chief and council of the community. And again, I take my hats off to our organizations, AFN, Chiefs of Ontario, and so forth. But what I've seen in the last 20 years as being chief and almost all those years, that there needs to be a reconciliation between the AFN and the Ontario region. I've seen throughout the years where we've had, our region at odds with the national organization. And if you are elected as the national chief, what is your plan to reconcile the differences between the Assembly First Nations and the Chiefs of Ontario? I strongly believe that we need both organizations for advocacy, both at the national level and at the regional level. And I'm hopeful that if either you are successful and being both from Ontario, what is your plan for that reconciliation process? Miigwech.
Thank you for that question. Well, it's lucky that you said it was the question was for Roseanne Archibald and sorry, and
Chief Fiddler.
Right, and Chief Fiddlers. My apologies. So Roseanne, please go ahead if you'd like to answer the question.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief King, for that question. And as the former regional chief, I have been a strong advocate nationally, and there have been historic issues that I inherited, and I know that the current regional chief has also has to deal with the same issues that have been going on for decades. And how I plan to reconcile is that to me, it's always about relationships and the positive relationships that you can build with people. And that has to be reciprocal. It has to be a two-way street. I've always advocated for positive relations with everybody that I work with. And certainly, I was going to call him Grand Council Chief Hare because he was on the leadership council. I really Regional Chief Hare, and I have a really great working relationship. We worked together for 3 years on the Leadership Council in Ontario, and to me, that's the basis of reconciling those differences with Ontario. There are many issues where regions have specific matters that they need to deal with. And that's what I have advocated in my platform document, Chief King, that the regions have to be empowered. They have to lead their own work. That First Nations have to be driving the agenda, as you said. You talked about your own community initiatives and doing that work on your own. And to me, that's where it starts. So it starts at the community level, and those communities together create a regional response and a regional approach. And then from there, that regional approach becomes a part of building national consensus. And I think this is where we really need to do more work with regions, and every regional chief that I know across Canada knows where I stand on this matter. That for me, the regions need to lead their work. They need to be empowered to do that work without interference from the AFN. The Assembly of First Nations is here to support regions, to give them a platform nationally where they can fulfill their mandates. And that's how I will work with Ontario. I will work with Regional Chief Hare on what are the Ontario priorities that I can support as a national chief. And I will then work with my national executive in terms of trying to build consensus around that. How do we all work together? And on those areas where we can't find consensus, then we take a regional approach. And as national chief, I support those regional approaches. And we find the consensus where we can build it. So thank you very much for that question. I appreciate it. Miigwech.
Thank you, Roseanne Archibald. Alvin Fiddler, if you would like to speak to this question.
Yeah, miigwech, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, miigwech, Chief King, for that very important question. And it's something that we've heard over the last few weeks right across the country, that there are some regions that feel that they don't belong to the AFN, that their voice is not heard, that their voice is not respected, and the direction that they give to the national organization is not, that there is no action that follows through, whether it's in Ontario or Treaty 8, that there are some groups that are ready to pull out altogether. And I always talk about how I will serve you, how I will serve nations right across this country. That I will do so with humility and respect. That one of my greatest skills and the gift is to be able to listen with great care. That's something that I learned when I worked for the TRC over 10 years ago. To be able to listen and hear what whoever it is telling you their story. And so that is something that I will commit to you with a renewed mandate, with a new approach to work with Ontario, to work with all regions in that spirit of respect and reconciliation. That the only way we can move forward on the issues that we talked about here this evening is if we stand together, if we work together. That we need each other to make each other strong, whether it's through our tribal councils, our PTOs, our regions, our national office, that all of us need to be in sync, that all of us need to be on the same page to be able to advance the issues of our communities and to make things even better for our children. So that's something I will commit to you, Chief King, that when it is safe to do so, to visit your community and have that respectful dialogue with you and your council. So miigwech for your question.
Thank you, Alvin Fiddler. I recognize the question was directed to two candidates, candidate Archibald and candidate Fiddler, but I will allow other candidates to chime in on this topic if they would like to. Jody Callahoo Stonehouse, would you like to speak to the issue?
This is an important question, not for Ontario. In Alberta, we're seeing similar things, and it's important now that the Assembly of First Nations no longer takes partisan positions. We can no longer speak over our rights holders. Canada has a fiduciary duty and a responsibility to consult with each and every one of our nations. At the Assembly of First Nations, we have a responsibility to ensure the communication process takes place, not be the communication process. And we need to ensure that no nation, no chief is left behind in these conversations. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Jody Callahoo Stonehouse. Reginald Belrose, are you interested in speaking to this question?
Yeah, good question, Chief. In my experience as a leader, an open door policy is important. Communication is key. Promoting a common agenda with the united vision. And I know there's still regional priorities that need to be identified, but I believe through that common agenda, united vision, it's the best way to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Reginald Belrose. Dr. Kathy Martin, I do see your hand up, so I'm presuming you would like to speak to this topic. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief King, for your question. And your question was, how do you, as National Chief, reconcile the differences between the AFN and regional offices as the regional offices of Ontario? Well, in a very practical sense, we have to do, first and foremost, clearly identify where the problems lie. So first and foremost, we have to identify what are the roles and responsibilities of the AFN and what are the roles and responsibilities of the regional offices. So when we look at that, then we're going to start to examine when and what caused conflict. So when we look at what built up to this conflict, was it situational? Was it personal? Was it a combination of both? And what were the factors that contributed to this? So when we're doing that, as National Chief, of course I'd be involved, but also other people will be involved as well. Because with the responsibilities of the regional office and the responsibilities of the AFN, the decisions made at those entities affect not only those entities, they affect the general public, they affect everyone around them. So real work has to be done in order to reconcile. And when you start on building relationships, you have to be very inclusive of everybody involved, not just the two people at conflict, but how it affects the greater whole. And again, I'll revert back to my talk about frameworks, because that's where my specialty lies. And so in a situation like this, after we've identified this, we've come to a baseline of what and how this conflict arose, then we can start to begin, when both parties are ready, because this is key, to do some sort of restorative justice, and where not only the issues are dealt with, but the underlying feelings and the emotion is dealt with too. This is the only way that reconcile can happen in a meaningful, productive way. So this is how I would do this as a National Chief. I would do this in a manner that is respectful to both offices, clearly identify the roles and responsibility, clearly include everyone that's involved and the effects it has on other factors, and then come to some sort of agreement between the two to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kathy Martin. Kevin T. Hart, if you would like to speak to the question, please feel free. Or you may pass, whatever you prefer.
Oh, thank you. Get myself out there. I want to thank the chief for the questions, very important. I think that the next national chief, whoever he or she is going to inherit a very critical time when we talk about our unity and nationhood. We can see that right now when we talk about what's happening across the coast, across this country. You know, our relatives in BC are being affected right now. Our relatives up in the far north are being directly affected with climate change, with the high water situations and the emergent situations occurring in our First Nations during a pandemic. My understanding, of course, is that the entire the Anishinaabe and Aski Nation had pulled themselves out of the Ontario before the election, and that those are critical things that need to be addressed as the next national chief to bring those priorities forward. When we look at that across the country, we hear from our relatives in the Treaty 8 region, for example, when they talk about the relationship between the Assembly and the national chief, and how that message moving forward, when they are very assertive of their inherent rights, jurisdiction, and sovereignty. There's going to have to be a balance for that next national chief who inherits this sense of bringing unity back to us across the country during a pandemic, during an economic recovery, as well as when we talk about what's happening and transpiring right now with the unmarked graves and such. You know, even looking at that in the long run, it's going to be estimated it's going to take at least 10 years of work and such. So, you know, all of us, including us as candidates, it's going to take, I believe, a couple of national chiefs, maybe even 3 before some of this work is done. I believe that for us, we have to come together in common unity on the common things that we need to fight for each and every day. We hear it: safe drinking water, protecting our women and children. That's what I want to offer in terms of reaching out to bring that unity back in forms of, we have to create some kind of communication protocols, issues and priorities that are delivered from the respected regions to the National Chief's Office on how issues and priorities are brought forward, because we're an advocacy body. The National Chief is there to open doors for the chiefs and the rights holders, first and foremost, and we have to get back to the original intent of protecting our Aboriginal Canadian inherent rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Hart. I will pass the floor to Lee Crowchild if you are interested in speaking to this question.
We can get in, I'm muted now. So we're talking about sovereignty here. Really at the root of this, we're talking about sovereignty. And my uncle, I always talk about my uncle, and he says we need to have a united front, because it's not just about getting our piece of the pie. He said the strength of our future is how we hear diverse voices and how we come forward as a united front. I was asked this by a few chiefs now, what do you think about our sovereignty? If we want to separate, will you support that? And I says, damn straight I'll support that. Because you have the individual rights as your nation to decide what's best for you. You know, people say, well, we need to block vote. And it says, oh, okay, the more affluent nations are going to benefit from that. Those nations that don't have very much to start with will end up being left with not much to start with. They become dispossessed. But because there's alliances, you try to maintain those alliances in that. As we talk forward here, Chief, you know, we have to be brave. Even though we're nervous, we have to create that narrative. And we have to be brave enough to change things. And this is why I say I'm giving the power back to the chiefs, because you are smart people. And as Kevin says, you know, we're an advocacy group. That's the role of us, of the national chief. And I'm saying that I want to give that power back to you. When I was chief of my nation, I gave the power all to my council members and say, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. You might be scared, but I'm going to be right with you. And I'll say the same thing to all of you chiefs too. You know, even if you're not scared, I mean, I'll be scared for you, but I'll be standing there right with you. Because we have to be brave enough to challenge our own prejudices. And because if we don't, then that's blocking us from loving. And that's really what we are. Our despair is deep. Like I said earlier, you know, it's coming out as self-harm and lashing out. I just have to go and look outside and I see my relatives, my young relatives that are walking the roads and that. Those that are living with their addictions and that. You know, there's an answer there. Because it's right there, you know, they're saying, look at me, I got nothing. And you're driving by and you got something, you know? And I always tell chiefs at the end of the day, when the meeting's over, you look in your phone there and you see how many people are not gonna have food tonight. How many people are gonna suffer from domestic violence and sexual abuse. That's your lowest common denominator right there. That's reality and right in your face. And you have to try and find a way to address that. We don't have all the answers as chiefs, but in our communities, we support our women. We support those young people, not youth, young people. They're adults. Young adults that don't know anything, but they're still adults. We treat them as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee Crowchild. I will just note that we have just the one question left. I recognize it's late. I will take the question and ask everybody to speak briefly to it, but I think we have time for it, and then we will wrap up. So a question from Chief Don Harris. Please go ahead. We can't hear you at the moment. Still can't hear you. Is there a way we can put your question into the chat for a quick and I can repeat it? Or we can try to do the audio. I believe the question is coming to chat while we're Encore. Is it muted on our end? Sorry. I will. It's something on your end says our audio team. There must be an audio issue on your end. I encourage you to just type the question in. I will remind people while we try to sort this out that tomorrow we start voting at 9 a.m. Eastern time. If you have any questions or issues about voting, please do feel free to call the helpline. That number is 1-833-236-8324. I'm passing on a message to Encore that Chief Harris says the host will not allow him, is not allowing, so I don't know if there's some kind of issue there. Isn't that just our luck that we have this kind of communication issue on the last question of the day? Can you try speaking now, Chief Harris? Nothing. We're going to move, we're going to try and move Chief Harris to a breakout room really quickly to resolve the issue. In the meantime, I will again remind people that that voting will go from 9 a.m. Eastern time in the morning. It will finish at 3 p.m. Eastern time. That's 12 noon Pacific. We will have the results at 4 p.m. and another round of voting, if required, would go shortly after that.
Hello.
There we go. We hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I was gonna talk about communities in BC. Like, I'm Chief Don Harris, Douglas First Nation, Chair of the Statlam Chiefs Council. And in British Columbia, there are a number of communities that are not in the treaty process, nor are they negotiating treaty. And in BC, we have an issue of overlap. And these are caused by federal and provincial policies where the revenue share has encouraged communities and nations to extend their territories for the purpose of revenue share. And so they are requesting that we put it on our elders to address these. But I'm wondering is what will the national AFN do to look into these issues in BC, where a lot of the overlap was created by the policies. You know, a lot of these provincial policies were in place for a number of years, whereas today there are a number of chiefs that have grown up with these claimed territories caused by the province and Canada. So I'm just wondering what will the national office do to help rectify these overlap issues caused by with the communities that are negotiating treaties and other self-governing agreements, and overlapping and interfering with the inherent rights of communities that are not involved in such processes.
Thank you for the question, Chief Harris. I will open the floor to Kevin Hart if you're interested in speaking to this question. We'll start with Kevin Hart and move down the list from there.
Thank you for the question. It's a very important question when we talk about relationships and such moving forward, Chief. What I want to ensure is that working with you as well as the leadership moving forward, that we bring issues and priorities forward to governments of the day, working with leadership in your respected region to address those concerns directly, whether we work with the local province, as I see right now, when you're talking about rights and such right now. The BC region right now, for example, is going through a process of UNDRIP. Now, of course, with the royal scent of C-15, everyone is looking, including First Nations across the country, is how is that going to be implemented? Because it affects everybody's rights each and every day. We have Aboriginal title holders, of course. We have First Nations who have treaty and inherent rights. Of course, when we look north of 60, that's when we look at our modern day nations there as well too, in the processes that they're going through. You can see at great length, like even when we talk about comprehensive claims and specific claims, for example, as well as our policies and the overall relationship when we talk about future resource development, for example, in treaty or such territories, and that it's always been an issue when we talk about overlapping territories between First Nation resource development. I've seen it happen in my experience here in the Manitoba region when we talk about resource development. Us here for our First Nations, you know, on the backs of our people, we've been devastated by resource development in terms of hydroelectric development, for example, in other resource-rich regions, for example, like Saskatchewan and such. You look at their uranium, of course. Alberta, you're looking at oil. And of course, you in the respected region there in BC, you're seeing different projects that are being both supported by the chiefs that are elected through our Indian Act system, but also we see the voices of the hereditary chiefs and their hereditary systems and such. And those are things that are very important for the national chief coming out of the relationship moving forward is to ensure that we find that balance. Of course, it doesn't say anything in our charter right now in respect to hereditary governance systems and that. I believe some of those governance systems, when we talk about those hereditary systems, are very fundamental and laid the foundation to what we see now, not only here when we talk about the government of Canada, but overall how we've governed ourselves since time immemorial. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Hart. I'll pass the floor to Lee Crowchild if you'd like to speak to this question.
Just trying to understand the whole question here, and I'm going to try and make an attempt to get it right here. You know, you really have to admire those nations in BC because they're the risk takers. You know, C-15 is certainly going to the UNDRIP is certainly going to be of a benefit to them, and I'm always excited to see change makers. You know, certainly I come from a treaty area, and we're loyal to treaty, but I support those that are change makers as well. When I lived in BC, that I learned that a lot. And what I learned from that area too was the idea of kinship. You know, so everything that we're sharing here is about kinship too. Or else we wouldn't be, I mean, we'd be throwing mud at each other from this point on, but we're not. Because we all know that there's a common goal we're trying to achieve. You know, Chief, you know, thank you for that question. And I know there's a lot of other chiefs in BC have sort of asked the same question. And I gotta say, I admire you for the efforts. Do I have an answer for that? I don't know. But I'm willing to sit down and talk to you and hear what you have to say. And, you know, I'll support, say, okay, this is a really good idea. How can I help you do that? Because we got, you know, I'm pushing that we get back to traditional governance that's steeped in our people, governance that's steeped in our community and our kinship lines. You know, for me, I have relatives that come from Kamloops. You know, that's just the way it works out, and all different places. I have relatives that are from the Dakotas, Sioux Valley, and that. You know, OG Crees from Onion Lake and Frog Lake. They're all diverse. So when I was the city chief, I didn't make decisions just based on Sudena. I had to think about all my kinship lines, and if I'm making the right choice, because that's important. Family is important. You know, and in your question about seeking a direction here, you know, yeah, damn straight I'm going to stand beside you. And I'm going to listen to what you have to say, because this is your time, this is your power. I'm going to try to open those doors for you, you know, and say, this is what these chiefs over here are saying. You have to listen to them because they speak a truth. And that's what I can say to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee Crowchild. I'll pass the floor to Roseanne Archibald if you are interested in speaking to this.
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate the question. And for me, the government benefits when we disagree. And we need to do this internal kind of reconciliation with each other. And in Ontario, we have many overlapping traditional territories as well. And in my own community, we have a number of development around hydro, run-of-the-river hydro, and other natural resource developments. And we figured out how to work together on the issue of shared traditional lands and to ensure that we are making room for each other in our negotiations and in our agreements with different resource development companies. And so in terms of the APTN role in helping First Nations navigate that question, to me, part of it is a policy problem. It's a policy of government to create this kind of policy process that puts First Nations at odds with each other. And I would certainly advocate and work with Regional Chief TG on this issue and find out what the BCAFN is doing in this regard and support that work. And certainly advocate for changes in policy, government policy around this issue of overlapping traditional territories that could cause tensions between First Nations. And so for me, that is part of the way forward, is for First Nations to occupy that space and to find ways and to have resources, especially. I would definitely advocate for resources so that you can have those kinds of negotiations with your neighbors on traditional shared lands, because that happens right across Canada. So I hope that I've answered your question, but one of the things I also wanted to say really quickly is all the candidates got an email from Chief Donna Aljum from Nikumin Indian Band in BC. And she said as of a few hours ago, we heard that they got the good news that their electricity is back on. Soon they're going to have phone lines, and I know that they're working on removing fridges and freezers for health reasons, and they need to restock their supplies. So we are all praying for your safe return and for Lytton First Nations and surrounding areas as well. So this is some good news today, and certainly want to send my prayers your way in BC. Miigwech.
Thank you, Roseanne Archibald. May I pass the floor to Alvin Fiddler, if you would like to speak to this question.
Yeah, miigwech, Chief Harris, for your question. I know that there are fires near your community, so I hope you're keeping safe along with the families, the citizens in your nation. We are thinking about you as you go through these this terrible fire crisis. But the question that you raised is an important one, and it's important that as we address these crisis situations, that we keep our eye on the long game, on the important issues like what the issue that you just raised about the title, about the work that we need to do to ensure that we are we're looking after our territories, our land, our resources, and the planning that is done to do that work. I think it's also important I just also want to acknowledge the leadership from BC for all their work that they've done over these many years, and the important decisions that have resulted in their victories and their fights, whether it's the Sparrow decision, Dugalmic, and most recently the Blueberry River decision. I was just texting Chief Yahi just recently just to congratulate him because these decisions mean that you are in control of your land and your resources, and that industry and government have to listen to you. And if there are issues about overlap, again, with respectful dialogue, I'm sure that we can overcome these overlaps that exist, not just in BC, but in our own region as well here in NAN, in Ontario, and I'm sure other regions that because of historic kinship ties and that our territories overlap. And that is something that we need to first of all acknowledge and work towards addressing. And that's something as Grand Chief or as National Chief, rather, that I would work with you if called upon to sit with you and the representatives with the regional chiefs from those regions to have that dialogue. And again, just working towards resolving these outstanding issues so that we, first of all, need to get them out of the way and do the work and the planning that you need to do towards whether it's towards development to ensure the sustainability of your nations. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. So I thank you, Chief, for your question. Miigwech.
Thank you, Alvin Fiddler. I will pass the floor to Jody Calahoo Stonehouse if you're interested to speak to the question.
Thank you, Chief Harris, for that question on overlapping jurisdiction. I think the role that the Assembly of First Nation can play is a very integral one, not only for British Columbia, but for also other territories that are wrestling with colonial law as well as the hereditary law. And so what we need to do at the Assembly is set aside space for us to explore our hereditary laws? What are our stories around the ways we act in a particular place? What is the agency or the authority of the river, the water, the rocks, so that we are also taking into consideration the laws of the land, natural law, our customary laws. At the Assembly, we need to make space for the common law as well as for our laws, so that when you sit down for these jurisdictional negotiations, you have all of the tools there for you, all of the resources, particularly in British Columbia, where you're often sitting with the province, that you're able to assert your hereditary system, your laws, as well as whoever's jurisdiction it is, that you have had the time and the resources to negotiate that prior to sitting with the province, so that you're going to the province with your solutions intact. I think that's what we can do at the Assembly. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Jody Kelleher Stonehouse. I'll move to Reginald Bellerose if you are interested in speaking to this question.
Yeah, Chief Harris, I want to thank you for the question. I listened to you at the December meeting when you were raising something similar to this, the modern day treaties, self-government nations. What I believe is the First Nations interests need to be top priority. Our rights and jurisdiction trump federal or provincial laws or policies. I believe that the spiritual component that you mentioned is very important. We need to bring in our knowledge keepers, our traditional knowledge keepers, our elders. They add a lot of value. Land and ancestral lands. It's very important to many people, and with that importance comes the how best to approach it. The ancestral lands is where the Creator put us to use the rights that He give us, the inherent rights. What I believe is we had 100% of the land base of this country at one time. We're now down to less than 0.5% of the entire land in the country. Canada has no land. That's the problem here, is that when you go through all of what you have to go through, it's BC who now has the ownership of the land, or title is what they say. We have to put forward our own perspective to the lands and how we use the lands, how we've always used them, and then how we will use them. So I think it's a good opportunity to have a land discussion, because in every region, there's specific claims, there's loss of lands that need to be corrected. Lands is one important area that we need to correct the wrongs of the past. And those wrongs are hurtful, the land stolen, resources moved out of your homeland, forced out, all of these wrongs. So Chief, I appreciate the question, and I believe it's an important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Reginald Bellerose. I will pass the floor to Dr. Kathy Martin if you would like to speak to the question.
Okay, certainly I would. Yes, when I spoke earlier in my speech, I talked about the importance of coming together as nations, both the traditional and the elected governance. The reason I say that is both have legal stance, both are powerful in their own sense. And you had mentioned that they wanted to pass this off to the elders, which indicated to me that they wanted some traditional input into this land protection, which is why I advocate for bringing together these two groups of traditional and elected governance. In doing so, we have to remember we have inherent rights to the land, especially on unceded territory. Those rights supersede a lot of the policies and legislations that came afterward, because Canada was built on the foundations of our lands and our inherent rights. So we have practiced our inherent rights in our laws of the land since time immemorial. And just because they are not written down in a format that the provincial and Canadian governments are used to doesn't mean they don't exist, and doesn't mean that they're not valid. So they are valid and they do exist. So the job of the AFN is to ensure that these are presented in a way that we can use to state that this is ours. It's still ours. And we can do that by our legends, our stories, landmarks, names that are in the territory that are indigenous to that land. So again, we are practicing what we have done since time immemorial. And in order to sustain our inherent right to the land and our inherent responsibility to that land, we need to continue doing what we've done since time immemorial. And yes, this is going to come to legal blows. This is going to come to a conflict, okay? Because we know we have rights to the land. It's coming into conflict with people who think that they are now in control of permits, they are now in control of everything on that territory. So it will be a costly and legal battle, but it's definitely a battle that we need to do to preserve our inherent rights for 7 generations down the road. So the role of AFN would be to support these processes, to put things in language that the Canadian and provincial governments understand. We should also start to look at our relationship with Canada as legal. Start looking at targeting them for compensation for loss of use and loss of resources on these traditional lands. That usually gets a lot of attention. So that's my answer. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Kathy Martin, and thank you for the questions that were raised tonight. I think we covered a number of important areas, and I really want to thank everybody for participating in today's session. The candidates who have had a very long day, thank you for all of your efforts through this All Candidate Forum, and we've now reached the end of the All Candidates Forum. And I wish each of the candidates good luck tomorrow. Thank you again for the participation from the chiefs and proxies through the event. And I want to remind everybody that the elections will begin at 9 a.m. tomorrow Eastern Time. You will receive your email at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. That will provide you access to the ballot with the link in the email. For those voting by phone, you can use the phone number that is the access number for voting. That will begin to allow you to vote at 9 o'clock as well. Voting will end at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And I really want to again say how much I appreciate all of the candidates and all of the questioners for keeping to the time today. That was really incredible. It has been a long day, so I will let everybody take rest at this point, and please come on back tomorrow. We'll have a short briefing at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on opening of the election, but just a short opening, and then we'll go to voting for that 6-hour period. So all the very best, have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.